So ancient Troy is positioned in the realm between myth and history, between the story of the Iliad and the unraveling story constantly being uncovered by historians and archaeologists today. For so long, all we knew about Troy was from the perspective of the Iliad, as well as other Greek myths. But that is now changing. The writings of the Mycenaeans, who were the Achaean Greeks referred to in the Iliad, has been deciphered, of course, providing much pertinent information concerning the legendary story of the sack of Troy. What many people do not know is that ancient Hittites also have a record, and of course, the Hittite language has been deciphered, and it reveals a very different story about Troy. In investigating the story behind ancient Troy in relation to the Iliad, we must examine the evidence from four different vantage points. First, we must look at the Mycenaeans, those who would later be understood as the Achaean Greeks by the Iliad, who attacked Troy. Second, we must look at the records of the Hittites about Troy, deciphering from their writings what they knew, both from those who lived at Troy and the Mycenaeans occupying the regions nearby. Third, we must examine the archaeological evidence found at Troy itself. Finally, fourth, we then need to examine the evidence from the Iliad, produced during the Greek Dark Age, to see how much is verifiable through the earlier evidence and what kinds of interpretations eventually evolve in relation to this event. But before diving into the historical details, let us briefly describe the story of the Iliad along with some of the background story as well. Now, in general, the Iliad is a war poem recounting an expedition of the Mycenaeans to besiege the city of Troy that occurred around 1190 BCE, but was recorded by this epic. So remember, it supposedly occurs around 1190 BCE, but this epic was composed between 850 to 710 BCE, so roughly 400 years later. According to the Iliad, this war lasted for 10 years, but the actions covered in this work takes place over a period of only a few weeks at the very end of the conflict, and even never gets to the very end of the conflict. Following the destruction of Troy, the Mycenaean civilization began to decline. Just at the time, of course, when the Sea Peoples were throwing the entire Mediterranean into anarchy. By 1100 BCE, all the prominent Mycenaean cities were abandoned. At this time, those known as the Dorians entered into Greece, who likewise spoke Greek, but they appeared to move into this region because of a power vacuum rather than as a conquering people, choosing to live as tribal groups and not settling down into cities. From 1100 to 800 BCE, we enter a period known as the Greek Dark Ages, with much of this epic recorded in the Homeric tales. Because literacy had died by the fall of the Bronze Age, those invested with the responsibility for carrying on these stories from that forgotten age were called bards. These professionals recited and often even sung poetic myths from memory. These poems were known as rhapsodies. The word rhapsody meaning stitchers of songs. You see, their genius resided not on the actual material itself, for they always attempted to present materials that their audience would be most familiar with, but how they presented their stories, how skilled they were in stitching these stories together to create these epics. So this is it. This is the idea. So you guys have all heard of Bohemian Rhapsody, right? By Queen, and how it kind of jumps from one to another kind of meter, of pace, of style. Well, rhapsodies are similar in many ways. And so what happens is this. I know in the modern age, we look for the ideas of who came up with these ideas first, the authentic, fingerprints, so to speak. But for the ancient Greeks, it is all about presentation. It's all about entertaining people with various stories about giants and gods and heroines and all different kinds of romance and ferocious battles. And they would sit around and they didn't have much to do. They didn't have a TV, right? They didn't have many kinds of entertainment, but they could sit together and tell these stories. So these stitchers of songs, what they would do is they would hear other songs from other bards and going, ooh, that's a good story. They memorize that and they stitch that on. Now, nothing is written down. This is all oral tradition, right? And so Homer, it's like, well, did Homer exist? People always go into this, although it is said that he was blind. The ancient Greeks seem to believe that he actually was a real person. And people go, yeah, but the problem is we look at the Iliad and the style keeps changing around. So it must be different authors. Stitcher of songs. Of course, it's different authors. He's hearing different songs from different sources and putting it all together, right? But there is what's known as a Homeric gloss, where you can see how these ideas, how these stories are framed a certain way that is consistent all the way through. And that's pure genius. So yeah, he's hearing these songs. There'll be differences and of course, these songs came about from the time of Troy, from the 1100s BCE. But he's bringing them together. Right? He's gathering them together through oral tradition, and that truly, what is a rhapsody is supposed to change. So you'll have the situation. Well, the story will go on. It seems consistent. And they'll present a character, and all of a sudden, what will happen is that everything will change, and it kind of goes, okay, now let's learn about this. And he just kind of swoop, put that song in there. Let's hear about Achilles' shield for a while and armor, right? It's like, oh, that's another song. Is that helpful? So this is what the Iliad is all about, right? Putting it all together. And as I mentioned, these travelers went with various tribal groups during the Dark Age, entertaining people. Of course, as I mentioned, two of the best stitched songs were the Iliad and the Odyssey, as they're attributed to Homer. Both works were inspired by the Mycenaean age. Now, however, interpreted as the heroic age, people by such heroes as Achilles and Odysseus. To the Greeks of the Dark Ages, the Mycenaeans lived during a time where gods directly interacted with humans and even had offsprings with them. Both works, as I said, were attributed to Homer, right? And internal evidence seems to demonstrate that there is a consistency all the way through. I mean, what do I know? I was in the classics department at UCI. We went through the Greek of these works, and we talked about the Homeric gloss here. Now, internal evidence also from the Iliad demonstrates that the author had an intimate knowledge of the regions around Smyrna, which is modern day Izmir in Turkey, prompting many scholars to believe that the author may have originated around the Ionian coast or maybe one of the islands nearby. The Iliad is currently the oldest extant literature in Western civilization. As for the backstory that led to the Trojan War, the Iliad refers to what happened in various places in various digressions. But a fuller account of the details was part of an epic work called the Cypria. Now, the Cypria, this covered the causes of the Trojan War and then runs all the way through most of the 10 years of the war itself, up to the time of Achilles was angered by King Agamemnon, and it concludes here. And of course, this is where the Iliad begins. While the Cypria was finally collected around 625 to 600 BCE, roughly about 100 years after the Iliad was composed. Uh, and then, of course, later on, obviously, this is oral tradition. Later on, it would be written, right? The materials contained in this work, however, the Cypria, are as old as the materials in the Iliad. Both of them drawing upon these oral traditions carried on by the Greeks during the Dark Ages, following the Mycenaean conflict at Troy. Unfortunately, most of this epic is lost with only 50 lines surviving. I wish we would be able to have this work. But fortunately, many ancient writers quote it, refer to it in some way, especially a certain Proclus who lived during the 2nd century. Thanks to him, he actually gave a prose summary of the work. But I would like to see it in poetic form. So these are discoveries yet to be made. And I actually believe that someday, because it was so popular, someday we will find it. It's just a matter of time. I do not believe that is lost forever. Again, how do you lose something that's that popular? Well, you can, but maybe I'm optimistic, a little too optimistic at times. So of special interest in the Cypria was the incident of the beauty contest, often called the Judgment of Paris, that was considered one of the direct conflicts for the war against Troy. The story runs that in commemoration of the marriage between the goddess Thetis and the mortal Peleus, these, of course, are the parents of Achilles, Zeus, the father of gods, decided to have a great banquet and invited all of the gods and goddesses and anyone of immortal status, save that of one deity, and that is Eris, the goddess of discord, because he wanted to keep the celebrations pleasant. Naturally, Eris is upset by the direct slight against her, so she arrived at the banquet anyway and threw in the midst of them a golden apple from the garden of Hesperides. Let's take a look at the first image. Now, this golden apple had upon it the inscription, Celeste, for the fairest one. For the fairest one. Well, immediately, as you can imagine, 3 goddesses claim the apple. Hera, the wife of Zeus, Athena, the goddess of wisdom, and Aphrodite, the goddess of love. Okay, let's see me a little bit. So they asked Zeus to decide which one was the fairest. But but deciding that this he kind of thought that might be a little bit reckless, since his wife was one of those claiming the apple, because Hera's there. So instead, he said, "Hey, I know who's good. Paris. He's a mortal prince from Troy and one of the 50 sons of King Priam. I think he will be the best judge." For he had only already fairly judged another contest between 2 bulls, one of his own and one unknowingly of Ares, god of war, who was in bull form. And he rightly, because you should, chose the Aries bull. So that's a lot of bull there. So the contest was to be set upon Mount Ida, with the three goddesses appearing before him. Let's go to the next image from ancient times. Naturally, of course, the goddesses appear before him. There they are, right? Naturally, each one of them offered bribes to influence him to choose him. Hera promised to make him a great king over all of Europe and Asia. Next image. Athena said she would bestow to him her wisdom and make him into a great warrior. Finally, Aphrodite said she would give him the most beautiful woman in the world. So, what are you going to choose? Paris? Are you going to choose to be a great king over endless territories? Are you going to be a great warrior with wisdom? Or are you going to get the most beautiful woman in the world? So, what does Paris, what does he decide? Who does he choose? Well, he chooses to get the most beautiful woman in the world. There's always a catch. As it turns out, the most beautiful woman in the world happened to be married to a certain King Menelaus of the Greeks. This is not good, right? Next image. Well, we can blame Paris, but there's another kind of story here. You see, evidence from sections from the Cypria, as quoted by Athenagoras of Athens, said that Aphrodite may have actually cheated. She used these special magical enchantments that she got from the Teretes and the Horai. And so as she approached, flowers were all around her, and beautiful music sounded as she approached to be judged, and just wonderful aromas came cascading into his nostrils. So it is claimed that, well, he was compelled to do so. So now you got a problem. Supposedly, he's got to get the most beautiful woman in the world, who happens to be Helen, married to King Menelaus. Next image. So Paris visits the court of Menelaus. Okay. And then he abducts his wife, the beautiful Helen, next image, and takes her back to Troy with him. After the abduction, King Menelaus calls upon his brother, King Agamemnon, to gather 50 ships to attack Troy, to take the city and bring Helen back. So the Greek fleet crosses the Aegean Sea from Greece and arrives at the beach near the city of Troy, which is located in the northwestern Anatolia, of the southwestern edge of the Dardanelles, the Hellespont, which is the narrow passage connecting the Aegean Sea with the Black Sea, and of course, northwest of Mount Ida. And next image. So the actual story of the Iliad opens up with Chryses, the Trojan priest of Apollo, begging for the return of his daughter Chryseis, who was taken captive by the Greeks and claimed by King Agamemnon as his own. So he's claiming the daughter of the priest of Apollo to be his concubine, right? As as his chattel, as his loot. So he's really angry. So no matter how much Chryses offered in the way of treasures, King Agamemnon refused to hand her over. And so the priest prayed to Apollo for help. And what does Apollo do? He sends a devastating plague. Let's look at me for a little bit. A devastating plague. What is interesting about this is Apollo, in this guise, is connected with plagues. What is fascinating is that the Apollo that is worshipped, that was worshipped in Asia Minor, but going all the way back, was also connected to plagues. And so there seems to be a connection here. In fact, many people believe that aspects that this is an Indo-European derivation, that there is a plague god, and one form, of course, as the Indo-Europeans cross from Anatolia and going off into Persia and into India, it will become Rudra, who is the god that connects with plagues and will give people get people sick through his arrows, right? Later on, of course, Rudra will combine with Shiva and add to his destructive aspect. Well, the same thing happens in Asia Minor and Anatolia. And so you'll have still ancient places dedicated to Apollo that's connected to plagues. In fact, in some places, Apollo is also connected to mice, those who oftentimes are believed to spread the plague. So this attribute, which is definitely not mainland Greece, is already revealed to be of Apollo within this particular context. So I find that fascinating, right? So we're learning some origins here. So anyway, so what happens now is quite a few problems here. Is Agamemnon, the plague is going on. After 9 days of plague, Achilles, leading the situation with others, called a great meeting, forcing Agamemnon to relent and to return the daughter to his father. But Agamemnon's upset. He's like, well, so then he decides to take Achilles' slave girl, Briseis, away from him to compensate for his loss of Chryseis. Achilles, who is half mortal and half divine, is portrayed as very temperamental, with flashing eyes to match his flame red hair. Because of Agamemnon's actions, Achilles refuses to fight against the Trojans along with his men, putting the Greeks at a real disadvantage because he was considered the greatest out of all the warriors. He was invincible, well, nearly invincible. When he was a baby, he was dipped into the river Styx that made him immortal. Well, of course, except for one place, as you know, they had to, when they dipped in the river Styx, they had to hold his heel. And so that was the only vulnerable place. And so that's where you get the idea of an Achilles heel. Of course, later on, he does get killed because he is pierced through his Achilles heel. Next image. Achilles even goes as far. So what happens is there's problems here. Next image. So Thetis is then approached, and so Agamemnon, so what happens here? Achilles even goes as far as asking his goddess mother, Thetis, to ask Zeus to make the Greeks constantly lose in their engagements because he's so mad against the Trojans, so that they would realize how much they needed him. Talk about delusion, talk about, he's just full of himself, right? So Zeus goes along with the plan, sending Agamemnon a dream indicating the opportunity had arrived to fight. Let's go back to me. This is his mom, Thetis, there. Well, the king decides to do so. He was also uncertain if his men were still worthy warriors, and he gives them a challenge, a test, to see if they really are for him. And so he orders them all to go home back to Greece. This is a test. This test proved to be a very bad idea, for they decided to take him up on this proposal. They start to leave. At this point, Odysseus intervenes and, with the help of the goddess Athena, inspires them to stay and to fight. After giving a long list of those who are on the Greek side of the war, King Priam of Troy hears about their arrival on the plain, and so he calls out his troops. And with this, we get another long list of those who are on the Trojan side. But the battle does not commence. For Paris, next image, for Paris now challenged King Menelaus to a duel instead. Paris is actually not that brave. They call him he's kind of a dandy, but his older brother Hector forced him to do so. For after all, it was Paris who caused all the trouble in the first place, stealing away Helen from her husband. So, calling a truce, Menelaus and Paris fight, with the king defeating Paris. But at the very last minute, Aphrodite rescues him right before the death blow and whisks him away back to Troy, placing him in his bed with Helen by his side. Hera is not pleased with the truce and pressures her husband Zeus to influence the Trojan warrior Pandorus to shoot an arrow at Menelaus, who indeed is wounded. With the truce broken, the battle commences. The great mortal Greek warrior Diomedes begins to slay many Trojans left and right, even killing Pandorus, who shot the offending arrow in the first place. Let's look at me for a little bit. Diomedes humbles the Trojan champion, Aeneas, who was then rescued by Aphrodite in the same manner as she rescued Paris. Aphrodite is just getting involved right here. Aeneas, by the way, who's saved by Aphrodite, will, of course, later on be the one who leaves Troy and for what will become, according to a promise that's made to him, to found a great city, actually, to found the Roman people. And so Aeneas is understood as the founder of the Romans. So favored by Aphrodite. So there's a connection. And so the Julia Claudians, starting with Julius Caesar to Augustus, claim lineage through Aeneas, which is like just lots of fun here. But Diomedes, during this conflict, does manage to wound Aphrodite in the process, angering the gods, Apollo. Let's go to the next image. I think I have an image of Diomedes, who warns that he must not fight against the gods, but only mortals. Diomedes, does not listen, even wounding Ares, the god of war himself. Hector stops his men from running and instills in them the courage to fight again. While Hector begins fighting a duel against Ajax, they have to stop because of nightfall. And so the battle in general is broken off. As the Greeks burn their dead, they also start building a wall around their ships. Meanwhile, the Trojans fight amongst themselves over whether they should return Helen or not to her husband. Zeus now decided that all gods and goddesses must stop assisting the Greeks and Trojans and making all divine intervention forbidden, because, his word is law, so to speak. In the next battle, the Trojans beat the Greeks and forced them back their recently built wall. At this point, the Greeks were in a very desperate position. Let's see me a little bit here. Achilles, wanting them in the first place, forcing Agamemnon to admit that he was wrong to have taken Briseis away from Achilles to compensate for his loss of a slave girl. So they send an embassy, inclusive of Odysseus and Ajax, to beg Achilles to come back. But Achilles, he refuses to help, saying he would not give them assistance unless their ships were actually on fire. Wow. Not sure hubris or delusion. Following the night of the failed embassy to Achilles, the battle does not go well. With Agamemnon, Diomedes, and even Ajax, they're all wounded. They're out of commission. They're going to lose. Well, it looked like the Trojans were about to defeat the Greeks. Hera decides to distract her husband. Next image. Because, husband Zeus is on the side of the Trojans. Hera's on the side of the Greeks. So what she does is she distracts her husband Zeus seducing him with their charms and lovemaking and all the sweetness that goes with it, and then tiring him out so that he falls into a deep sleep. As Zeus sleeps, Hera gives Poseidon, the god of the seas, the opportunity to help the Greeks against the Trojans, changing the tides of war, so to speak. When Zeus awakens, he finds the Greeks were now winning with divine intervention. Wait, didn't I just say everybody follows? Well, I guess not. Not Hera. Angry, he orders Apollo to also intervene in favor of the Trojans, enabling them to breach the wall and near the ships. It looks like, hey, guess what? They're going to be on fire, or at least close to it. Now, Patroclus. Oh, this is awful. Next image. Patroclus, who is the best friend of Achilles, cannot watch anymore, and he begs to join his fellow Greeks to defend the ships. Eventually, Achilles relents to Patroclus, and he says, okay, I'm not going to fight, I'm not going to defend, but you look a lot like me. I bet you if you wear my armor, which happens to be your size, that they'll think that you are me. And because everybody's scared of me, they'll see you and fear the worst. Okay. This is his best friend. This is not going to go well. So Patroclus, looking just like Achilles, arrives on the battle with his troops just as the ships were being torched. But Patroclus decides to keep on fighting. He should have stopped. He's getting, he's a method actor. He's getting into the moment. He's feeling it, right? And so he just keeps on going, but he's not Achilles, but apparently he just forgot that. And so he even defeats the Trojan hero by the name Sarpedon in battle. And then pursuing the Trojans to the walls of Troy itself, goes all the way to the walls of Troy. Apollo tries to stop him from going further. And at this point, Hector, one of the many sons of King Priam of Troy, slays him. Next image. Overcome with grief at the loss of his friend because of his own stubborn actions, Achilles makes up with Agamemnon and agrees to go to battle the very next day. Filled with wrath, Achilles vows to exact vengeance against Hector. Achilles is given new armor by the gods and goes into the battlefield, slaying every Trojan he found. Near to the point where he filled the river Skamadros with their dead. Let's just go to me for a little bit. So he kills so many people. The rivers are filled with dead bodies. And now the god of the river is angry at Achilles. And so now the river is attacking Achilles. But now the gods were again fighting with mortals, and so Hephaestus beats back the waters of the river with his own firestorm. So it is fire versus water. The Trojans flee back to their city with Achilles chasing them, but to keep him from entering Troy, Apollo disguises himself as a Trojan warrior and diverts him away from the city. With the Trojans safe, Apollo then reveals himself. Yet one warrior refused to run, Hector, who had enough of running and felt shame for those who did. His resolve was to face Achilles face to face, but he fails when the Greek warrior comes a little closer. He's like, wow, he's kind of big. Oh, no. So running away, Achilles chases Hector, but Athena forces him to look back, and so the two confront one another. The duel is brief, with Achilles stabbing Hector in the neck. As life leaves him, Hector tells Achilles that he too is fated to die in battle, in this battle. What a heel. It will be his heel. Angry, of course, he takes Hector's body and drags it around the city of Troy and around and around, mutilating the body as it goes. Now, The ghost of Patroclus then visits Achilles, who begs for a proper burial. And so the next day they hold a funeral, and actually have funeral games, complete with prizes. Zeus is angered that Hector's body is defiled and believes it should be returned to his father, King Priam. Next image. So Hermes, the messenger god, protects Priam and the wagon he was riding in as he enters unnoticed. Oh, yeah, into the Greek camp. At a certain moment, he appears before Achilles, grabs him by the legs, and begs him to allow the return of his son's body. Achilles is moved to tears and gives his permission. They all share a meal together, believe it or not. You got to remember these are the Greeks, okay? All right, let's have a let's all share a meal together. Make it all work out there. And so what happens is they share a meal together, after which Priam returns to Troy to give proper burial for his son. And here the story of Troy ends in the Iliad. Dr. Rietveld, doesn't the Iliad go to the very end? No. We don't know what happens? No. What about? No. It's not in there, the Trojan horse? No. Huh. That happens later. Not too much later, but later. Then in the Odyssey? No. This happens before the Odyssey. Oh, I know a lot of people. They're all hoping to see they're reading through. There's got to be a Trojan horse here, but no, it's not there. It stops short of the actual fall itself. And of course, it does fall, right? So the idea is they fake the fact that they're leaving in other stories, but they leave back a trophy, right? A special prize connected to Poseidon. It's a gift. It's left on the shore. This nice wooden horse. Obviously, this is not the right size. It's too small. Maybe put water on it. I mean, Poseidon style, it'll grow, right? Like little sea monkeys, whatever. The point of the matter is that what happens is that the Trojans they see this, they grab it. Hey, we'll take this prize. They bring it into the city of Troy, and you got to beware of Greeks bearing gifts. They should have looked the horse in the mouth, but they didn't. And so what happened is in the belly of this wooden beast happens to be Greek soldiers, and so under the cover of night, when they're partying and getting drunk and having a great time, uh, the troops are released, unlock the gates, and Troy falls and just burning, pillaging, and all that kind of stuff. And then what happens is Odysseus kind of goes too far. He offends Poseidon. You never want to do that. And Aeneas, he leaves and, of course, goes by way of Carthage and eventually to Italy to found supposedly the Roman people, according to the Aeneid. And when it comes to Odysseus, because he offended Poseidon, he tries to get back home, and it takes him 10 years to do so. Uh, 7 of which he's with a nymph on an island, wishing to be back to his blessed, loved Penelope, who looks across the wine-colored seas, waiting for her husband to arrive. And takes 10 years. I mean, you have the Cyclops, you have his men offend the sun god by taking his cattle, and just everybody dies of his group as he tries to go back to Ithaca because he's the king of Ithaca. Odysseus is supposed to be wise, and then he ends up, with Calypso, 7 years, and she keeps him hostage there for 7 years because she loves him, and I don't know what the relation's going on here. Meanwhile, Penelope is waiting for her husband, and then, of course, it's interesting, just as a side, that he does he does finally come back, and he's wondering what his wife has been up to. the poor person, poor Penelope, what happens is that they're all these suitors are wanting to marry her so they can become the next king, and so they are breaking all the rules of hospitality. They're eating her out of house and home, causing all these problems. And she says, "Hey, I'm going to go ahead and weave this tapestry. And when I finish the tapestry, then I will decide who I'm going to marry." And of course, by day she's weaving, by night she's unweaving, taking it all out. They do figure it out eventually. And so she's trying to force because she believes her husband is alive. So she's looking across the wine colored sea, looking for her husband, and and of course he is with Calypso going to the wine colored sea, looking for his blessed Penelope, beautiful Penelope. But when he arrives there, he go, "Oh, maybe she hasn't been faithful to me." So he asks Athena to turn him into an old man so he can investigate. What? The only person, actually, not person, the only living thing that recognizes him after this time. Remember 10 years he's been fighting in Troy, 10 years on the way back. So that's 20 years. The only living thing that recognizes him is his dog. His dog sees him, wags his little tail, and breathes his last. So then he goes, he figures it out. Oh, I figure out what's going on. She has been faithful. He connects with Telemachus, his son. He connects with her, and they form a great plan. And that plan, of course, is to do what? Is to kill the suitors. And so he's still kind of the old man as turned in by Athena. And so what happens is that the story is that whoever's able to, string the bow of Achilles, not Achilles, string the bow of ranges of Odysseus, will be the one who will become king. And so all the suitors go in there into this grand hall, and they close the door, they lock it, and everybody's trying to string this great bow, and nobody's able to do it. And then this old man comes up, everybody laughs at him, and he strings the bow instantly. And at that moment, Athena reveals that it is indeed Odysseus. And Telemachus by his side, what they do is they kill them all. This is violent. They're all dead. And hey, he is king. And then, of course, he goes to his blessed Penelope, and Penelope says, "How do I know that you're really alive? I've been thinking about this. I've been thinking that I want to move our marriage bed to the other part of the room." He's like, "How can you?" He's like, "I cut down a mighty tree and I crafted and carved our marriage bed out of it, and I built the room around it." And she's like, "You know the mysteries of the bedroom," and she knew that it was him. Anyway, that's the old. Can't believe I just summarized the entire Odyssey in that short amount of time, but there you have it. So that's all later. Okay, so but who were the Greeks who were presented in the Iliad? Who are they? They, of course, were known as the Mycenaeans. Now, as the Minoan culture thrived on the island of Crete and about the surrounding Aegean Sea, mainland Greece was also developing a thriving culture. During the early Hellenic period, ranging from 2750 to 2000 BCE, a non Indo European people dominated Greece, who practiced agriculture and who possessed a metal industry. As a bit of trivia, villages whose endings are SSOS date from this period or earlier. Much like the Minoans, those living in Greece during the early Hellenic appeared to be very peaceful. Then around 2000, next image, 2000 BCE, the Indo-Europeans arrived into Greece, and so ushering in the middle Hellenic period. We're taking here, looking here some of the Mycenaean pottery. And this is ranging from about 2000 to 1550 BCE. These invading Indo-Europeans were often very ruthless, with villages of the non-Indo-Europeans either burned to the ground or abandoned. Yet in other cases, the Indo-Europeans and the earlier inhabitants were able to coexist and over a period of time blend together. These Indo-Europeans spoke Greek, and so we can say at this point, Greek culture enters into Greece. These first Greeks were known as the Mycenaeans, and they had to learn to adapt to a very difficult, difficult terrain. Next image. Uh, and what I mean by that is that it was often dry, hot, rocky, with jagged hills and mountains divided up the landscape, creating a series of narrow valleys that were isolated from the others, giving rise to a sense of cultural independence from one valley to another. Up along the slopes and the valleys, the Mycenaeans were most successful in growing grapes and olives, while those along the coastal regions were able to add fish to their diets. The Mycenaeans found eager trading partners with the Minoans to the south, as well as others. The important thing to remember here is just like we saw in the Iliad and as well as the Odyssey, is the fact that these kings are very independent from one another. They have their own sense of identity. Not only have their own sense of identity, they focus on worshiping different gods. While they do share gods, they focus on certain patron gods that are special to their own. Obviously, when it comes to Athens, is Athena, for an example. So this is the way it is. So they're not working together. They are separate, different kings. Okay. From 1550 to 1150 BCE, the Mycenaeans had developed into an urban as well as a rural culture, but they also became more aggressive. The beginning of this prosperity is evident from the material culture as early as around 1600 BCE, with their cities becoming more extensive, their agricultural methods more advanced, their grave goods more rich, and their artwork more elaborate and found in more locations about the Aegean beyond the Greek mainland. So there were several catastrophes that went on that did give the Mycenaeans an upper hand during this period of time. Of course, you have the eruption of Thera, which greatly disturbed the Minoan civilization. You had a series of earthquakes. Other things were going on too. And this enabled the Greeks to the Mycenaeans to take advantage and to eventually take over the Minoan civilization. The Minoans were a very different kind of people. Unlike the Mycenaeans, for example, while the Mycenaeans were patriarchal, the Minoans, while not necessarily egalitarian, there seemed to be more of an equal role between men and women, right? While and of course, women were depicted in the artwork doing the same kinds of activities that you see that the men are doing. But of course, unfortunately, when it comes to the Mycenaean civilization, women were essentially property. They were chattel. And you could see this even, unfortunately, in the Iliad, in their treatment of these women, right? You know, these are possessions. And that's unfortunate. This is the way the Mycenaeans think. The Minoans had more of a bureaucratical monarchy. It was a nice, everything was based on a bureaucracy. There's some centralization there. We can see this in the way from the materials that come through us, not linear, but the legacy of the bureaucracy in linear B, but leftovers from the earlier period. But unfortunately, when it comes to the Mycenaeans, we have, of course, these central leaders, these diverse leaders, and they're known as a Wanax. Let's go to the next image. Each king was known as a Wanax, and you can see the word right here, who essentially was like a warlord. And so that's just the reality. In fact, remember, these are Indo-Europeans, and because they're Indo-Europeans during this period of time, there's a sense of tribalism. The idea of having these warrior-like kings, having these heroic kinds of notions of battle and glory and loot and so forth. And they establish for themselves these towns on the top of mountains surrounded by thick fortifications. Again, unlike the Minoans, up until we get to the 1500s BCE, typically did not have walls around their cities. They didn't feel like they needed it. But when it comes to the Mycenaeans, there's thick walls on top of these mountaintops. Remember the Indo-European. Just think of the Aryans in India, or think of the Vikings in the Scandinavia area. They are related to each other, by the way. So it's this is warlord-like culture. Let's go to the next image. So we have, of course, some of the goods here. These are Mycenaean goods. This is a pretty cool one there. Let's go to the next image. There we go. We got a golden cup here from Sparta. You can see there. And you can see the sympathies of the artist happen to be with the bull. It's like, hey, you know what? That's the side I pick. You just can't make this up. Believe it or not, there is a sense of humor. Let's go to the next image. This is an example of the hill fortresses they have, right? Okay, so take it down for a few moments. So there is a difference. So the Mycenaeans, what they are, is basically in so many different ways. They kind of are marauders and pirates. They're warriors. They are the people of the Iliad, right? They write to a T. They got them down. And so you can see, even though the various details of the story, a lot of it may not be true at all, when it comes to the zeitgeist, when it comes to the spirit of that age, it really does seem to capture that period of time. And it becomes something to look upon with a sense of fondness, nostalgia, that maybe someday we could return to these great days, right? So they were notorious pirates, moving about the coast of the Mediterranean, plundering other merchant vessels, pillaging coastal cities, stealing whatever they can, including people from various lands they explored. The Hittites mentioned these Mycenaean raiders. It's not just me that's complaining. It's the Hittites too, in their records. They are pirates in their minds. And we're going to go into evidence of that in a little bit. Of course, one of the wealthy places that they attacked happened to be the city of Troy. We'll go into that. As for the Mycenaean religion, they were polytheistic, worshiping a series of Indo-European gods who were earlier precursors of the Greek gods that are familiar with most who are informed by Greek mythology. And the question becomes which gods the Mycenaeans worshipped and which ones were added with the advent of the Greek Dark Ages. Okay, so we're moving to another kind of question. Are the gods that are worshipped in the Iliad and the Odyssey, are they the same or are they different? Well, we did kind of establish already that Apollo, who's connected not with the Greek side, but with the other Anatolian side, he seems to still have some of the ancient connection that will soon be forgotten, at least in mainland Greece. So how much of the gods and goddesses referred to by the Homeric writings were close to those worshipped by the Mycenaeans, and how much were closer to the ones from the 8th century BCE? Furthermore, how much of the Minoan gods and goddesses were absorbed by the Mycenaeans along with other indigenous groups? We know that the Mycenaeans were very synchronistic, readily adopting Minoan bureaucracy and various cultural elements. Did they likewise adopt many of their beliefs as well? Well, we can assert with much confidence that the Mycenaeans, being Indo-European, did worship an all-high god by the name of Dies Piter. Next image. As the worship of Dies Piter traveled east and the Indo-European people entered into India, he became known as Dies Pitra, right? You can see here, the derivatives right here, who created the world via the goddess Mata Prithvi. As for Greece, he became known as Deus Pater and then Zeus Pater, or simply Zeus. From the word Dies, we also derive the words deity and divine. Moving further west, the name for this all-high god becomes Jupiter, for the Latin evolving into Jupiter. Most of the Mycenaean deities, okay, let's take that down. Well, actually, don't you think this is interesting? Take a look at these images here. You can see how this Indo-European deity, how it's carried over not only into India and not only into the Latin world, but also derivatives of that word are carried, an idea and worship are carried on to look at the the upper part of the image, according to Slavic, as well as the Germanic and the Norse, as well as the Irish, the Celtic. So they're all connected to one another. And so you could trace where people are migrating and how, based upon where they are in deriving or connecting to the word dus Peter, so dies Peter. Okay, you can take it down. Okay, so most of the Mycenaean deities, most of them were a lot, well, I should say a lot of them were male, reflecting their patriarchal background. This means that the majority of goddesses, with the exception of earth goddesses, were, well, Minoan or from other indigenous pre-Indo-European culture. There's exceptions, of course. The Mycenaeans and later Greeks came to believe in two sets of gods. First of all, there were the Olympians, who were mostly sky gods that were derived from the Indo-Europeans, with a few notable exceptions. The other group of deities were known as the chthonic gods. And curiously, most of them, well, at least a lot of them, are female. Most scholars agree that the chthonic gods were older than the Olympian gods and were furthermore worshipped by those living in Greece proper prior to the arrival of the Indo-Europeans. Like most ancient religions, the Mycenaeans made offerings to the gods intended as sacrifices. The fact that some of these sacrifices were human often disturbs those who wish to retain a certain air of reverence towards Greek mythology in general. Archaeologists have uncovered some of these sacrificial victims, often with these bones discovered just outside of various tombs. Of course, the reference to King Agamemnon's sacrifice of his daughter, Iphigenia, right before leaving for the city of Troy, given to the dark Artemis, supposedly, is a reflection of that ancient tradition, right? But there are traditions where she actually lives and she becomes a high priestess of Artemis. But anyway, much of the evidence for Mycenaean beliefs arise from Linear B, from the inscriptions, from many different sites, including Knossos and Pylos. At Knossos, the Linear B tablets are in the form of lists. Zeus is referred to by name and even has a month named after him called Zeus Dictaeos. Poseidon appears by name at Knossos, appears to receive an ox, a pig, and a sheep as a sacrifice. Although the recording priest seems to make a correction that this offering was actually intended for another god, Ares. Oops. Even then, you can make scribal mistakes, or maybe later on, that just somebody in the bureaucracies, no, that was supposed to go to somebody else. Oops, it's supposed to be the god of war, as well as a god by the name of Enleos. Many goddesses are referred to at Knossos, designated by having the word potnia, meaning mistress, placed in front of a very specific designation. Let's go to an image right now. So potnia means mistress. There we go. Hey, there we go. You can see right here, bringing to the temple of Potnia 100 rams and 190 pigs. Bringing by ship to Potnia 100 rams and 190 pigs. So there you have it. You can see here. Um, Yet there is a goddess mentioned at Gnosos and at Pylos who is simply called the Potnia, or the mistress, without any added designation. At Thebes, there is a reference to tribute being sent to the house of Potnia. This is a clear evidence for the fact that while the Mycenaeans and the Minoans before them had many goddesses, they also appeared to have had a great goddess. The Potnia Atana, translated as the mistress of Athens, is very curious. Even more of interest is the Potnia of the labyrinth. As mentioned, one tablet at Knossos mentions the god Eileithyia in connection to her worship at a cave located at Amenossos. Only priestesses are mentioned in servicing the deity, in an inscription, with no male representatives whatsoever. One of the most frequent positions is known as the priestess of the winds. Let's go to the next image. I think I have that there, priestess of the winds. If not, this is, I love this here. So take a look here. This is victory used for the priest of Potnia. So next image. There you go. Oh, love this. Here's in this list here, you got a list of various gods. And I love this. You got Athena, Potnia, right? So the mistress Athena, Helios, Paeon, Poseidon, Aranus. So good. Next image. Here you have right there, you have the mater. So this is fascinating. Again, I'll bring this up. So we talked about that in Indo-European, mater, of course, means mother, right? So what does Ida mean, right? So Ida, da, is connected to ga, and so da means, and ga means earth. So Ida, meta, means earth mother. And so, and of course, it's interesting because you have the word pos, which oftentimes means spouse, and the idea of the spouse of the earth, Poseida. And so you have the derivative, of course, Poseidon. And so this seems to be a connection between these two. Next image. Here we go. And of course, here it is. Oh, this is to another. I love, again, once again, this is another offering here, but this is what I was mentioning too. The priestess of the winds. Do you see that on L3? This is a reference to that. Good, good. Next image. Okay, we'll take that one down. We'll keep on going. So there you have it, right? Nothing like seeing the inscriptions. Okay, so at Pylos, located at the far southwestern area of the Peloponnese Peninsula, the linear B lists are more complex, mentioning the specific gifts offered to each of these gods. What I find is interesting, because we are going there, is these gifts, these offerings are again consistent as we see of gifts and offerings to the gods and goddesses in the Iliad and the Odyssey. So are you seeing this already? This is interesting. So you're seeing lots of, so even though the Iliad and the Odyssey were composed in the 800s, they seem to be retaining a genuine knowledge of the period of time before 1200. Let's keep on going here. So, for example, over 1,000 tablets were discovered at Pylos and covered the period roughly between 1300 to 1200 BCE, which is exactly the period of time where we're starting to deal with situations of ancient Troy. Of course, the actual battles connected to 1190 or 1180, but close enough, right? But around 1200, Pylos was destroyed by fire. Again, like Knossos, Zeus appears to be a prominent deity and is directly paired with Hera. Important moment here. Hera is paired with Zeus in the Iliad. That's not an idea or formation that comes later. We have evidence here that they're already paired together before 1200 BCE. I want you to kind of earmark that. In fact, they have the very same sanctuary together. So it's obvious that he was already his consort wife at this time. The Zeus of Pylos has a son too, by the name of Drimios, one called Dewiju, which translates as Zeus priest, is frequently mentioned on the tablets. While Zeus is a male god, he is also understood as a female goddess too, and is called Dewia. And this female personification of Zeus had her own special sanctuary. One called Hermias Arias is mentioned, undoubtedly connected to the god Hermes. As for Arias, this name was later associated with a horse by that name, whose mother was Demeter Arenis of Arcadia. The name Dionysus also appears, but without any relevant connection to the context beyond that point. Let's go to the next image. I think we have an image here of Pylos where they discovered some of these tablets. I think it's this one right here. Yeah, there's the area where we discovered it. There is a palace there, Pylos, next image. Here we go. There we go. There's the word Dionysus, staying at right there. So Dionysus, next image. Here we go. And this is an image that talks about, these are linear B, about Poseidon. Good, good. All right, take this one down. Let's talk about Poseidon a little bit. Yet by far the most prominent god worshipped at Pylos was Poseidon, the god of the sea with his own special sanctuary called the Poseidon, located directly in the city itself. The Odyssey describes Nestor of Pylos making a great sacrifice to Poseidon, and this certainly fits the inscriptional evidence from the Mycenaeans during their time of occupying the city. That's right. Poseidon was very strongly connected with Pylos, according to the inscriptions, and yes, according to the Homeric tradition, specifically the Odyssey, it's connected to Poseidon as well. Look at this, another connection, right? The sanctuary called Poseidon was recorded as receiving a constant tribute of gifts, indicating the city's treasury was located here. The offerings made at the Poseidon are specifically listed. The first list mentions wheat, wine, 1 bull, 10 cheeses, 1 ram's fleece, and honey. A second offering lists wheat, again, 2 rams as opposed to the 1 bull earlier, 5 cheeses instead of 10 cheeses, oil, and 1 ram's fleece, which of course is similar to the earlier one. A third offering lists corn or wheat, wine, and 2 rams. A fourth offering lists wheat, wine, 5 cheeses, and honey. Are you seeing some consistency here? These 4 lists reveal a certain consistencies of ritual that will be carried on in cult practices down to the days of classical Greece, with grains offered first in order. So the first thing that's given out are the grain offerings, right? First, and of course wheat or some other barley or something else of that sort, right? Second occurs the libations with wine offerings. Third, an animal sacrifice is offered up, in this case, a bull or a ram. Although the fourth list does not have any animal sacrifices whatsoever. So bloodless offerings connected to animals follow, namely cheese and ram's fleece that was associated with purification. An association called, so I want to say this before I go into this. I want to mention the fact that, hey, so when you're reading the Iliad and the Odyssey, and you're thinking, okay, they're having these sacrifices. Well, these are clearly ones that are from the Dark Ages, from the 800s. The reality is, this is the way it was done before 1200. Another consistency. So again, already we're doing well. Already by reading the Iliad, you realize that it does, even though it has features that are from the Dark Ages, we're running into a lot of aspects that go all the way back to the Mycenaeans, quite a bit. An association called the Poseidiwis administered the cult of Poseidon. As for the cult practices at the site, one ceremony occurred here that was called the spreading of the bed ritual, where much oil for libations was required. Another celebration at Pylos was called the Festival of Bearing the Throne Around. I wonder what that was, the Festival of Bearing the Throne Around. Well, we do know, again, that many of the deities were put on a throne and marched around. This was traditional, not only Mycenaean, but even Minoan cultures. And this practice continued during the Greek and Roman times. And guess what? It continues to this day with the veneration of the saints. If you are familiar with the Mediterranean area, you'll realize that many festivities will show a saint on a throne being paraded about. Well, we have here the evidence that it just goes all the way back. Like Zeus, Poseidon was worshipped in female form, called Poseidiwi, who had her own separate sanctuary called the Pakyani, located somewhere in Pylos. 45 slaves specifically belonged to the sanctuary. Also worshipped here was a great mistress, Potnia. Once again, it's interesting that you have paired with a female Poseidon and a female mistress. According to the tablets, oil and honey were typically offered to the gods here, along with perfume. The priests and priestesses also anointed robes for purification. More specific mistresses worshipped at Pylos include the Potnia of the horses, whose shrine was discovered in the inner court of the palace, next to the arsenal where the tablet mentioned her name was discovered. The name Artemis, as a prominent goddess, is mentioned at Pylos, Artemito, Artemite, establishing the antiquity of her name. She was understood as the goddess of mountains and hunting. With the exception of Zeus, in the aspect of a female as well as Poseidon, it looks like the list is the same. You have before 1200 BCE, via the Linear B tablets, you got a Zeus, you got a Hera, you got a Poseidon, you got a Hermes, you got an Athena, an Artemis, Ares, a Demeter, Dionysus, plus you got the mistress and Aranus. It looks like, they're there. How's that, right? But now you can say with confidence that this is not something, an anachronism. This is something that connects to that. Okay, so one tablet inscribed in haste from Pylos, dating from the very last period of Mycenaean habitation, lists gold, men, and women sent directly to many sacred sanctuaries. Many scholars believe that Pylos was about to fall to an enemy, most likely the sea peoples, and were desperately attempting to appeal to the gods for help. The list of men and women sent to these temple sites is understood as meaning that they were possibly also offerings, maybe even human sacrifice. Well, we know all about the Mycenaeans who attacked Troy, which supposedly happened around 1190, 1180 BCE. We know about it through the Iliad. It looks like from Linear B tablets from 1500 to 1200 BCE, much of what we know about their involvement with the city of Troy comes to us via oral traditions. But we do realize that there are some gaps. Let's go to the next image. But a lot of people didn't even know that Troy was even real. They thought it was pure mythology. There's the tablet with the word Poseidon on it. Let's go to the next image. I like that image. So what happens is this grocery clerk becoming millionaire by the name of Schliemann read the Iliad and believed it was an actual location, not pure mythology. So, but up until his excavation of Troy, beginning in 1871, and his excavation of the city of Mycenae, starting 1874, which of course connected to Agamemnon, most scholars knew very little about the Mycenaean civilization. Beyond that are references from the Iliad and the Odyssey, attributed to Homer. In fact, both Troy and Mycenae were viewed as pure fictions by a large amount of people, and so had no basis in historical fact until Schliemann decided to take much of the geographical descriptions in the text literally. And when he did so, he came up with the realization that, wait a minute, this is a description of an actual place. So let's go to the next image. The earliest archaeological evidence for a settlement located at the site of is called Troy 1. You can see where here Troy is located. It is located right there at the Dardanelles. I want to mention a few things about this area, just a little bit. So you see Troy there. You see the Dardanelles. You see the little arrows. I know it doesn't mean much. You just go, yeah, these are just nice arrows. That's the way the current goes. It's coming out of the Black Sea, and it's a very strong current that is channeled through the Dardanelles out into the Aegean, out into the Mediterranean. And because of that, it's hard to sail up the river, or I should say up the straits here. It's very difficult. And so what you got to do is you got to take your sails down and you got to row. You got to row a lot. In fact, it extends, that current extends further out. So not just the Dardanelles, that strong current connects out into the Aegean, which is, of course, south of Troy here. So these people have been rowing for a very long period of time. And so what will happen is Troy is at a perfect location. You can see here, Troy is at a perfect location because what it can do is that it offer rest for those who've been paddling through these rough seas. At least give them a brief moment of relaxation. But of course, they're not going to do so for free. And so there is going to be a toll that will be paid there. Next image. Okay, so that means that Troy is at a commanding spot where it really does command the region between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean, which is very important for trade. This is a perfect location to build a city. So we're going to have obviously Troy 1, which thrived from 3000 to 2600 BCE. It was perfectly situated along the narrow pass known as the Dardanelles. Troy was also the best place, as I mentioned, for ships to rest. Um, Next image. You can see the layout here through their various times. By the time we get to Troy 2, 2600 to 2250 BCE, the city covered an area of 90,000 square meters, about 22 acres. Through comparative work and connection to the early Bronze Age settlements, on average, 150 people occupied per acre, which is called, of course, the population density. And so the population of Troy was around 3,300 people. Next image. We're getting to my pictures a little bit. A giant ramp survives from that period, along with the giant megrons. The Trojans were already using the potter's wheel by the time of Troy 2. The gold objects, incorrectly called the treasures of Priam by Schliemann, date to this level, so we know that they're sophisticated in smelting gold. Troy 2 was actually destroyed by fire 3 times. Why? Once again, because it operates in a very pivotal location. Everybody wants it. If you command Troy, you command the straits, you command the Dardanelles, and you command the passageway between the Black Sea and the Aegean into the Mediterranean. It's a really important site. It's the perfect site. So next image. And so you can see we're going to have a layer cake of cities surviving, being destroyed, being built again, time after time. Of course, as you saw in the image earlier, it's going, all these different civilizations, all these different cities are going to literally pile up, creating an artificial a mound. Because, what you do is you just build on the ruins of the predecessor. Next image. Around 2350 BCE, those who spoke Luvian then began to spread throughout Anatolia, introducing red slip pottery ware as they settled further south, west, east, reaching northern Syria during the second millennium. Okay, so these are the arrival of the Luvians. So the Luvians do arrive at Troy. In many cases, a large portion of scholars believe those who don't are still not up with the literature. If you're, and I'll give you some recommended books if you're interested. The Trojans are Luvians. That's their major background. Okay, according to the Hittite code written in Old Hittite, the majority of the areas where Luvian-speaking peoples lived was called Luwiya. Let's go to me for a little bit. So Luwiya, accordingly, um, Luwiya, of course, will be connected to the word Lydia, right? Studies of satellite imagery seems to suggest the territory was also densely populated during the late Bronze Age. And taking a look at the Luvian civilization during the part of the 1200s, When we do um, overhead satellite imagery, we do realize there's around 340 large city-like sites that dot this region that are Luvian cities, much of these needing to be excavated, which is, of course, going to be pretty exciting. So basically this, I'm not going to take the whole time talking about Luvians, but I will say this, is you got around 5000 BCE, you have the Indo-Europeans, and the Indo-Europeans leave the area what is around the Caucasus Mountains, and they go a different direction. One goes towards the northwest. They'll become the Slavs, and of course the Germanic peoples, the Celts, and so forth. Another group will go southwest, and they will become the Greeks. They will become the Romans. They will become anybody who is from a Latin background, right? Going all the way to Spain and so forth. Another group of the Indo-Europeans will go eastward. They will become the Persians, and then go dipping down between 2000 to 1500 BCE. They'll go into India, and they'll become the Indo-Europeans known as Aryans. But there's one group that goes directly south. And this group that goes directly south arrive around the 3000s into the 2000s, and they are the Hittites and a related group known as the Luvians. Now, the Hittites, what they do is they take over the middle part of the Anatolian plateau. They take that middle area. But the Luvians, who are kind of looked at as a lesser brothers of the Hittites, not treated very well, they actually get the better territory, I think, as opposed to the grazing lands of the central Anatolian areas and highlands and so forth. What they do is they get the entire coastline areas, including the area, the coastal regions along the northern part of the Black Sea, southern part of the Black Sea, going along to the western section of the Aegean Mediterranean, and of course along the southern coast along the Mediterranean. So they kind of have this little thin area, all these coastal regions. So they get the beaches, okay? So the Luvians will swoop on down, and as they swoop down, a large concentration of them will be in the area around Troy, and then go from there and spread along the coast. They'll go from there, and then they'll go a little due west, and then directly south along the coast, and then they'll turn around and they'll go due to the southeast from there. So these are the Luvians. Now, what I find is interesting, of course, Western Anatolia has all the great stuff. It has all the rich minerals and metal ore deposits. So this really helped the Luvian economy. Yet the Luvians always viewed Troy, oh, now we're getting some information, viewed Troy as their homeland and where they originally came from. Where are you getting this from? As demonstrated on an important occasion on the Luvian calendar known as the Festival of Istinawa. Okay, let's go to the next image. The Festival of Istinawa. So, this is great. So you see, here's alluvian territories. You can see here, you got the Wilusa. Those are connected to Troy. The Siha, the Mira, Arzawa, the Luka, which is the Lycians, the Tarhutasa, the Kiziwatina, right? So these are all in the Hapala. These are all alluvians. So what happens is they arrive first in the Wilusa area. Next image. But the festival of Istinawa is connected to a town which we do not know where it is. We have the inscription, but we know that it is somewhere on the Saharia River. How do we know it's on the Sahara, known as the Sakarya River today? The reason why we know that is because it says so in the recordings and the inscriptions in the poetry. It's referred to. So we know somewhere along this river, but it's debated. Some people say it's closer to Gordian, so we don't know exactly. But somewhere along this river, the city is located. Now, this city was known as Sun City. So Istanawa was known as Sun City. is important both to the Lydians and the Hittites. Here, many thunder songs were sung. Now, the Song of Istanawa, let's look at me for a little bit. Istanawa was a very popular one of these great thunder songs. And it starts with the following line. When they came from high Wilusa, aha, ata, ta, alata, ayanta, Wilusati. When they came from high Wilusa, and then of course it starts to cut off. Of course, this reveals trace origins for one of their important songs from Troy itself. Wow, because Wilusa, we'll talk about in detail, is Troy. It's another name for Troy, and you'll go there beyond a reasonable doubt in a little bit. So hold on. Only one Haran god is mentioned in this text, that Nubadig. The rest are Luvian, including Kamrusha and her son, the tutelary god of Tarusa. The Luvian priests also practiced cutting and bloodletting rituals, especially during the festival of Istanawa. So languages identified as Luvian include Lydian, Lycian, Carian, Malian, and of course, we can go into that. Now, it's interesting. Here we go. Frank Stark of the University of Tübingen recently demonstrated that the name Priam, who is the king of Troy at the time of the Trojan War, is connected to the Luvian compound Primua. And what does Primua mean? It means exceptionally courageous. King Priam, or Priam, which is a great epithet, right? Comes from that. So certainly, obviously, this means that Wilusa, Troy, is connected to Luvian-speaking community, right? So we move on to Troy 3. Let's go to the next image. Troy 3, 2250 to 2100, was very much the same as the culture of Troy 2. It was likewise destroyed by fire. Troy 4, 2100 to 1950 BCE, was a noticeably period of decline, with the general population shrinking to the point where they lived entirely within the original outline of the citadel of Troy 2. During the time of Troy 5, a major change is evident from what we find in the material culture, which is dated roughly around 1950 to 1700 BCE. For new settlers arrived into Troy, pushed into the region from the east as the Hittite Empire rose to power in Anatolia. From Troy 1 through Troy 5, archaeologists have discerned that the Trojans were eating mostly pork and lamb as a meat source. But this would begin to change after that time, with increasingly amount of cow bones found in garbage pits starting around that of Troy 4, meaning that beef was gradually entering into the Trojan diet. More than you ever want to know. Oh, whether the Hittites, the Mycenaeans, or just local changes influenced this, we are uncertain. Yet another change occurs at Troy at the same time. Let's see me for a little bit. Horses now appear to be in full use during the same time at the city. Horses were used to ride, to draw chariots, and to eat during this era, which began around 1700 BCE. As far as fruit, grapes were typical. Wheat for bread and porridge was another popular staple. The Trojans also consumed milk and cheese and yogurt. Dogs were not used for food at Troy, but right from the beginning were used for hunting, herding their animals, or just as companions. Cats don't make an appearance in the material culture until we get to Troy 8, but cats do make an appearance. They manufactured textiles for sale, often dyeing them purple from dyes extracted from seashells. So we're learning a lot about their Troy. We move on to Troy 6, is divided into an early period. Let's go next image, ranging from 1700 to 1400 BCE, and a later period identified as Troy 6 H, going from 1400 to 1250 BCE. Now, the first period of Troy, of Troy 6, between 1700 to 1400, was when Troy was part of the Ahhiyawa Confederacy. Ahhiyawa Confederacy, ending within 30 years of its demise, while Troy 6H thrived during the century when the Ahhiyawa state dominated the region, and then during the aftermath when the Hittites and the Mycenaeans fought over this region. So the citadel of Troy, next image, measured about 200 to 300 meters. We'll take that down, but we're going to go back to that in a few moments. While the rest of Troy covered an area of 250,000 square meters, or 62 acres, and so had a population of about 10,000 people. It was largely excavated during the 1990s. A clay seal discovered in the ruins of Troy 6 proves the Trojans spoke Luvian, although this is not the only language they spoke. Luvian, of course, we talked about that. So they, again, we're back to a Luvian background, right? Now, the Mycenaean late Helladic 2 and 3 vessels were discovered at Troy. So we do find Mycenaean artifacts, pottery, Greek pottery during this period of time that goes up to 1250. So we do have evidence that the Mycenaeans were already interacting with Troy. We find this in House 6F and G, which appear to be burned as a result of attack. Many scholars believe that the Hittites may have attacked Troy because they made an alliance with the Mycenaeans during this time. As we know, Troy was often under contest by the Mycenaeans and the Hittites. At one time allied to one, and other times allied to the other. We have Hattusilus III mentioned such a time, but we do not know how far back he is recounting the struggle. But we do realize that there is something going on, that there is a connection with the Mycenaeans early on. So we do find Mycenaean wares. Let's go and see. Well, let's keep on going. The old Hittite kingdom was further strengthened under Hattusilus I, who, of course, extended the Hittite domain to the sea. And the second year to have subdued Alaka and other cities in Syria. In the third year, he campaigned against Asua Arzawa in Western Anatolia, then returned to Syria to spend 3 years retaking his former conquest from the Hurrians. So the Asua League, let's take a look at this. So this is Asua. Now, the Asua League was very active during the time of the Minoans, into the time when the Mycenaeans are taking over regions of the Aegean. And there is, as we know, a relationship. There is pottery that is being found, Mycenaean pottery found along the coast of Anatolia. The Asua League will be at war against the Hittites. In fact, the word Asuwa will eventually become the word Asia. The word Asia, as in not only Asia Minor, but Asia Major as the continent, comes from the word Asua, this league. Now, we know that the Mycenaean Linear B also calls this region Assyria. And of course, between 1500 to 1200 BCE. Now, we find derivations of this word. For example, in the Mycenaean Linear B tablets at Mycenae, it's Asiwio. At Pylos, it's Asiwiya. And at Knossos, it's Asiyatia. But it's still, we got records of this. This is great. Even earlier, before the Mycenaeans, the Minoans in their Linear A documents, we can't read much in Linear A, but we can read a little bit because it goes through, because there's loanwords, Luvian loanwords, by the way, in Linear linear A that carries on to linear B, we see also reference to it as Asuya. The Mycenaeans then were direct contact with Asua, while Asia was once correlated with just the western coast of Anatolia. It eventually applied, as I mentioned before, to the rest and Asia. Now, here we go. A big moment here. According to Hittite records, the Trojans were at first associated with the Asua League. How do we know? Well, it turns out we have documentation of just that fact. Once again, I think I'm helping here unravel the mysteries, so to speak. Let's go to the next image. I think we have another, although I'm sorry, these maps are different languages. Here we go. Oh, okay, yeah. So you got the Asua League right here. You see Wilusa there. Good. Okay. So according to Hittite records, the Trojans were at first associated with the Asua League, which had 22 members, including the Luca, the Warisia, the Tarusia, the Wilusia, and the Caria, which is the Carians. Tudahilia, king of the Hittites, the first, later names these cities as Uka, Kespua, Analia, one name I can't, it's obliterated, Dura, Halua, Haluia, Karakisia, Dunaya, Adadura, Palista, another name that's obliterated and with a wa, Waria, Karupta, and of course we go through this. We have Taurusa, which is connected to the word Troas, and finally Wilusa. So we know as an absolute fact that Troy was connected to the Asua League. Now, let's keep going. Let's look at me for a few moments. And you're still looking. I don't see the connection with Troy. I don't see it. How are they connected? Okay. So the name Wilusa on the list of those associated with the Asua League, identified as Wilusa, is one of the names for the city of Troy. The name Wilusa, of course, corresponds with Ilusa, later known as Ilium, and hence related to the name of the later great Greek epic, the Iliad. For us, when we see Wilusa and Ilium, we see some variation, especially with the first letter appearing as a W. But evidence from the Iliad itself in the way the meter paces itself and off paces itself as a meter defective because of the omission, as well as other indications, for example, that the now missing consonant affecting the rhyme and rhythm reveal that even here the name once began with a consonant known as a digamma. This letter in archaic Greek later became extinct, but was once marked with a sign resembling an F, with the second stem down slightly curved. The digamma represented the W sound in Greek. It was called W and was readily used in Mycenaean Linear B between 1500 to 1150 BCE. By the 7th century BCE, the digamma, which reappeared when writing began, still had almost completely disappeared from the language, and so appears rarely in early Greek records, mostly upon vase paintings. Wilusa, Ilusa, Ilu, Iliad. There it is. but what about the name Troy? Now, the other name appears on Hittite connected to Asua is called Tarusa, with many scholars identifying this name with the region ruled by Wilusa or Ilium, the later area becoming known as the Troad. So Tarusa becomes Troa actually, and then Troad. In other words, the territory once ruled by Wilusa eventually gave the city its second name, and that's Troy, derived from Tarusa. So to make things more complicated, it's kind of like you have Sacramento, that is the capital of California, right? And so what happens eventually when the territory changes, right? It's like calling Sacramento, California. You got it now. Yeah, that's how it works. Okay, the Hittites referred to the Tarusa, and so we do have Hittites referring to them. We have the Egyptian Menetiv stele from 1220 BCE referring to the people of the Tursa. It must be noted that the Etruscans refer to themselves as the Racina, and later a corruption of the word Tracia, but many people will say that it's a derivation of the word Tarusa as well. Of course, who knows, right? The Luca are most definitely the list Lycians in the Xanthus Valley, of course, on that list. Of course, we have other places too. In fact, we know where they all are. But there we have it. Okay, so we know that in their struggle against the Hittites, let's go. Let's see here. Let's go to the Ahhiyas. Yeah. Okay. So we know in the struggle against the Hittites that those called the Ahhiyawa. The Ahhiyawa, that is the name of the Mycenaeans. So we do know the name of the Mycenaeans in Hittite records. Again, it's Ahhiyawa. They were allies. So the Mycenaean Greeks, the Achaean Greeks, the Greeks that we know from the Iliad, were allies of the Suwa League, at least by 1400 BCE, if not before, and provided them support for this league located along the western coast of Anatolia. And they were already an important trading partner. And so that's why we have all this Mycenaean pottery. The Hittites also knew the Mycenaeans very well. Most scholars now confirm that those called the Ahhiyawa in Hittite records, of course, are the Mycenaeans, with the designation Ahhiyawa corresponding to Homer's Achaeans. The two are related words. Once again, I just have to tell you, the Iliad got it right. It's pretty amazing. You're going, wow, this thing is really starting to add up. It's going to really add up. I have a big surprise at the end here. Right? We're not there yet, but it will be surprising. So, in fact, as many as 25 Hittite texts refer to the Ahhiyawa, starting from the reign of Tudahila II from the early 14th century BCE to the time of Tudahila IV, who reigned from 1237 to 1209 BCE. So we got records. We got 25 Hittite texts alone that will talk about the Mycenaeans, which will unravel some of the mysteries of the story, the backstory of the Iliad. So stay tuned. But eventually, the Hittite Empire under King Tudahila II, 1360 to 1344 BCE, as I mentioned, defeated the Asuwa League sometime before 1350. So the league that Troy was a part of, that Wilusa was a part of, is ended by the Hittites around 1350 BCE. As Tudahila was leaving the coastal regions following a military campaign against the states of Arzawa, Hapala, and the place designated as the Sahilan River, the land of Asuwa rose up and challenged his authority. And then, of course, we have the conflict. Now, there within Asuwa, there's a place known as Arzawa. Arzawa was the Luvian state that would eventually take over much of Western Anatolia after the fall of the Asuwa. So after the fall of the Asuwa, they will be the ones that really take control. Okay, so at the center of its power will be at Ephesus or Ephesus around the Kestros River. Other than Arzawa, you have the Siha River land was located along the Gedez River, which happened to later become known as Lydia, and Hippala was located further east. Now, what will happen is, by the way, the Hittite victory against the Asua League was devastating, with Tudhaliya bringing back 10,000 captives and soldiers to his capital of Hattusa, along with 600 teams of horses and oxen and sheep. He also brought back with him much of the population of Asua, including the former king Payakal and his son Kukuli, which is interesting. Kukuli, will come across that name again. So remember Kukuli, and we'll see why. In commemoration of his victory, Tudhaliya dedicated a series of bronze swords from those he defeated. One of these swords was discovered to have an inscription that declared in Akkadian, as Darthalia, the great king, shattered the Asua country, he dedicated these swords to the storm god, his lord. But there was another find at Hattusa, dating from the same time as King Tudhaliya II, a bowl of Hittite fashion depicting what we know to be a Mycenaean warrior wearing a plumed and horned helmet. At the time of the fall of the Asua League around 1360 BCE, the Ahhiyawa were still primarily located. You got to keep track of that. 1360 BC, the Ahhiyawa were still primarily located around mainland Greece in Mycenae, as well as the islands of the Aegean, but had already cultivated by that time a close relationship with the political state along the Ionian coast, specifically Arzawa. Okay, so Arzawa, which was still a smaller part of the Asua League, is now rising to dominance. A damaged letter dated to the reign of Tudhaliya II, again 1360 to 1344, mentions the fact that the king of the Ahhiyawa, or the Mycenaeans, was in possession, I'm quoting, by the way, was in possession of various islands, unquote, most likely the Aegean islands directly off the coast, and that there was an established relationship between the Mycenaean king and the state of Asua. So we already know with the Asua League that there is an alliance between the Mycenaeans and these Luvians along the coast. Most Hittite scholars believe Tudhaliya II was indicating through his various writings that the Mycenaeans, the Ahhiyawa, were militarily supporting the Asua, aligning their forces with theirs. So they are already involved as early as the middle part of the 1300s BCE. Wow. For example, one text from Tudhaliya's reign refers to a campaign in the Siha Riverland during this war. Either says the king of the Ahhiyawa withdrew, retreated, or it could say a person took refuge with or relied upon the king of Ahhiyawa. So we do know that there is an alliance, and it is against the Hittites. Now remember, the Asua League is in league with Troy, so we're seeing this is interesting. Another source written during the reign of Hittite king Arnuwanda II, 1322 to 1321, short reign, refers to an earlier incident during the reign of Tudhaliya II, 1360 to 1344, discussing how one of the king's vassal states, ruled by a king, Mudawata, decided to assert his autonomy from the Hittites, but then was attacked by a man from Ahhiyawa, so attacked by a Mycenaean. Again, this reveals the presence of the Mycenaeans here, perhaps in the form of more independent mercenaries. We know that at this point, the Mycenaeans will take over a place known as Miletus, south of Ephesus. So, yes, early on, the late part of 1300s, the Mycenaeans will gain a foothold already. I know you're going, wait a second, I thought Dr. Rietveld that, they're completely new to this area. They arrive in Troy and they have the battle, But turns out they're already involved in the region a century and almost a century and a half earlier than we thought. This is not a 10-year war. It's long and protracted, right? So history does say there's a conflict. You'll see where we're going in a little bit. Don't worry. Of course, this means the city of Troy, which is part of the Ahhiyawa League before the Hittites defeated it, was an ally of the Mycenaeans. They're ally of the Greeks. They're ally of the very people who, according to the Iliad, will take them over eventually. Yes, Trojans and the Mycenaeans, those who would later be called the Achaean Greeks in the Iliad, were friendly towards one another during this time and were unified against the Hittites. But we also know that sometimes Troy changed sides and favored the Hittites. Because the city occupied a very important location along the Hellespont, many powers competed for Troy. Wishing to fill in the apparent power vacuum in the region, Tudahia decided to make Kukulia, the son of the former king Payaka of Asua, the king of the vassal state of Asua, but this doesn't last very long, and it is abolished. Seeing this vacuum of power left behind as a result of the fall of the new Hittite stakes, the Hittites now go into decline. Another state that was there, part of the Asua League, but that will now strengthen itself, called Arzawa, then expands north and takes the place of the Asua League, with its capital, as I mentioned, at Apassus, corresponding to Ephesus. Okay, so according to a corrupt copy of the Hittite code, the area known as Arzawa will later on correspond to the Mycenaean name for the region, replacing the name of Luwuya. Okay, so there you have it. Now let's move on and go through a little bit here. Now, the capital of Arzawa is Apassus, often equated with the city of Ephesus. So let's take a few images here, and then I want to talk a little bit here about a few things. So this right here, this is Troy during the period of time of the early part of the 1200s up until 1250. It's a pretty large city. Next image. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so again, this is part of that Troy. You can see, pretty cool. These are my pictures. Next image. That's the South Gate, by the way. And so during this period of time, you realize that there will be the creation of not just a port, but you got two ports. Take a look at this. And so you can see here that people can go to one port, and they go up, and they can go also to the other as well. So their ships are protected from any kind of storms. Okay, next image. This is the Asua League. Next image. These are the various groups that we just talked about. You see they're all focused on Western Anatolia. Next image. And from the inscription here. And you can see right there, there's Wilusa, Troy. There should not be a question mark there. Do you see the Ahhiyawa? Yeah, you can see that they are already setting up shop, starting now. Milawatus, right there. Milawatus, that is Miletus. The Mycenaeans already get there, and they start to influence Apassus, which is the capital of the Arzawa League. But you can see they're working their way up towards Troy, which is at the top. Next image. And you can see this is kind of a nice image of where the Arzawa League appears in relation to Greece and to Egypt and into the Middle East, as well as the central part of Anatolia and the Hittites. The Hittites are oftentimes claiming places that are not their own. Oftentimes the Hittites claim they have all of what is now Turkey, all the Anatolian Peninsula. They certainly had more than what you see here, but when it came to the western coast, oftentimes it was the Luvians that were in charge. Next point. Next slide. So this is the area. These are the islands that are dominated by the Ahhiyawa, and you can see there's the word Miletus there. Here's Zarwan, Ephesus, and you can see Troy. Again, you can see the distance between these. So it looks like the Trojans, I'm sorry, the Mycenaeans are focusing on the central shoreline. But again, they'll be working up. Next image. And you get a better idea here in this map as well. And this is pretty well close to what it is. I would argue that the southern coast is under the Luvians and not such a direct connection to the Hittites. But other than that, the next image. All right, so we got some pottery here, and this is from Ephesus. Let's go to the next image. I like the spirals there. And these are Mycenaean pottery. So as it turns out, of course, Ephesus, Mycenaean influence in Ephesus is not exclusively evident only from the pottery, but we have many other kinds of ceramic artifacts that were found. Also, bronze double axes. We do have a tholos or tomb at Colophon. And next image, I just want to show you a few things, just a few pictures here. Beneath Ayasaluk Hill, these are my photos. I was there at the time at Ephesus. This is taken in 2008. And the Austrians, who I was associated with at that time, under Sabine Laudstatter, discovered not only a Mycenaean site, but a earlier Minoan site located at Ephesus. So the Mycenaeans were definitely there. So let's take a look so you can see for yourself as opposed to me just telling you. Next image. So here we go. So we could see just a series. I just look quickly at some of these pictures here. This one here, the next one. You can see it's located beneath the citadel that is built by the Turks, but it is centered around a hill dedicated to John the Apostle. Apparently, he was believed to be at the top of the hill and wrote the Gospel of John. Next image. And you take a look, and yeah, working our way at the at discovering the evidence here. This, down to the right, you see there, that is the basilica dedicated to John, and that is his tomb. So while above is where he supposedly wrote the Gospel of John, this down below is to the right is the tomb of John. The basilica is built around that, and both overlook the Temple of Artemis, which would be located to the right. The modern city of Seleuc is to the left. Next image. So you guys show that I was there. I was there. Of course, we got the working away. Next image. And, a lot of archaeology is mundane, but I just want you to see some relics from the Mycenaean past. So the Mycenaeans, while they did not take over Ephesus, next image, they certainly had influence over it. And so there you go. Next image. So, but we do have, and this is from that level during that period of apostasis. Many scholars believe that maybe the capital Aposis, which is Ephesus, is that you're looking at it, and it was an Ayasaluk Hill. So you may be looking at it here. Next image. I like this one here, and one more, I believe. Yeah, now, next image. So you got Aposis, right? This is Ephesus, and then south, you got what is known as Miletus. Let's go to the next image. This is my picture. This is where the Mycenaeans made a permanent settlement. So I know you're thinking, why are you bringing this up? I'll tell you why. I know we get the picture that the Achaean Greeks, that the Mycenaeans arrive at Troy from far away, far away of mainland Greece or the Isles, where the reality is, historically, is the Mycenaeans are already there. They already have an outpost, actually a few outposts located along the coast of Asia Minor at that time. And so they would have used land forces to move up the coast. How do we know? Because we got records of that too. I'm sorry, I'm rewriting history, but actually not history, rewriting mythology, right? Rewriting mythology with history. Next image. But this is a beautiful temple that's built later on. And there's me, just to show that I was there. None of this was there. This is Greek and Roman. Next image. But I want you to get the idea of Miletus. It's very, very flat, but it has an excellent harbor. one thing about uh, the uh, the Mycenaeans are always looking out for the best harbors. Next image, and we certainly have it here. So, next image. And this is another harbor, another outpost that is connected also to again, they are there, the Mycenaeans. So up and down the coast, you have these various sites. Next image. Yeah, this is again going along the coast further down at Limnos, as well as other places alongside. Good. Next image. Okay, so take this down and we'll go into this a little bit. Okay, so you get an idea here. So the Ahhiyawa were very much connected to the Mycenaeans. They are allies. This is obviously going to cause quite a problem, the Ahhiyawa League. And so what will happen is that you now have the Ahhiyawa League with a permanent base of Mycenaeans at Milawanta or Miletus, and it is officially occupied by one who is known as the King of the Ahhiyawa, of the Mycenaeans. In fact, for much of this period, as I mentioned, the city of Miletus was a Mycenaean colony, right? Directly there. And we saw Ilisos too, with the double harbor there. So, and so Mycenaean remnants are everywhere to be found. Now, King Suppilunia, these names, 1344 to 1322, was able to push back the Ahhiyawa alliance with some success. In fact, Suppilunia cultivated a close relationship with the king of Troy at that time, who was known as Kukauni. Now, that name should sound familiar, Kukauni, which is very much, it could be a Luvian name, but it sounds very Hittite, right? Meaning that Troy, at this point, disassociated themselves from the league and allied themselves with the Hittites. This means also that Troy, at this moment, between 1344 to 1322 BCE, also turned its back on the Asuwa, this is the Ahhiyawa League, which took over from the Asuwa League. It turns allegiance from it and took the side of the Hittites, which of course would alienate the Mycenaean allies of the Ahhiyawa League. Okay, but then the next king of the Hittites, his name is Mursili II, 1322. I mean, do you want exact knowledge? Here we go. 1322 to 1295 actually made a temporary peace with the Mycenaeans, even permitting the Ahhiya royal family to come to Hittite capital and to study the art of chariot making. At one point, when Mursili II was sick, a statue of a Ahhiyawa god was brought to heal him. I wish I knew the name of which god of the Mycenaeans that was used. Believed to have special powers, perhaps, but the peace did not last long, right? For eventually, King Mursili II went back to war again against the Ahhiyawa and their Mycenaean allies. The conflict began where Mursili II attacked Atarima, and so, yeah, so you got war. According to Hittite records, as Mursili II marched towards Apasa, which is Ephesus, a meteorite hit the city and injured its king, Uha Zita. He says, "The mighty storm god, my lord, showed his divinely righteous power and hurled a thunderbolt. All my troops saw the thunderbolt. All the land of Azarwa saw the thunderbolt. The thunderbolt passed us and struck the land of Arzawa. It struck Uyazita, the capital the city of Aspasis. It settled on Uyazita's knees, and he became ill." At this point, the now wounded Ahuyazita agreed to an alliance with the king of, the Ahhiyawa. So the king of Ephesus of Apassus, who is connected to the Arzawa League, who of course is allied with the Mycenaeans. Yeah, he goes over and he joins the Mycenaeans, but accordingly, Ahhiyawa headed west, and according to Hittite records, across the sea to the islands, and so he crosses over. Next, Ahhiyawa orders his son Paya Karuta to attack Mira, whose king Masgulia was married to Mercili's sister. And of course, you got all these different little details about, we know a lot about what's going on. All right. So what happens is as follows. With the Hittite victory eventually complete against Arzawa, the survivors fled to the fortress Paranda. But and during the siege, King Ahhiyawa died. Anyway, and so after defeating the Arzawa, the Hittites then split their territory into three provinces, which eventually become Caria, Lydia, and a few others. So there you go. But we do notice, and I want to fill in the space, that it does appear that the Mycenaeans hold Miletus from, of course, the 1340s all the way to 1230 BCE. And there's at this point, it seems that the Hittites finally take over this territory around 1230 BC. Now remember, the Mycenaeans, the connection with Troy is around 1190 BCE, but it looks like they lose their foothold in this region temporarily. We're not there yet. According to a letter dated to around 1295 to either the Hittite king Mursili II, 1321 to 1295, or Muatalia II, 1295 to 1272, by a client king by the name of Manaka Tarhunta, there was an attack upon Troy. There was. Let's go to some images for a second. So this is the earlier document that we just talked about. Let's go to the next image. And this is the seal. This is the official Hittite seal. Isn't that amazing how they seal this official document? Next image. Yeah, I want you to get an idea. Milwatas, Miletus, Apasas. That's Ephesus. And you can see where Troy is there, Wilusa. Okay, next image. Get an idea of the bearings. This is the battle we just described against the Arzawa League. Next image. And you can see here's the breakdown upon the map. Again, I just want you to get the idea of the territories. Next image. All right, here we go. Okay, so we'll take that down temporarily, but we are going right back to this image in a few seconds. Okay, so there was an attack upon Troy by a notorious marauder named Payama Radu. Who was also attacking other places about Western Anatolia. Now, the name Payama Radu is a Luvian name, with the name Payama meaning gift and Radu meaning devotee. His name indicates that he was from the local region. He was not Greek. Now, S.P. Morris and a few others believe that Payama Radu is connected in some aspects, to King Priam from the Iliad. And many scholars do believe that there seems to be some connection. Let's go to the image, the dreamed up vision of Payama Radu. So Payama Radu was a threat to the entire region during the 1200s BCE for, well, some say 35 years. Others say more like 50 years. The guy just, or maybe it's of a son of the same name. This guy just does not end. It's a very long time. He holds a large area in fear. Many scholars assert that Payama Radu. Some claim that he is connected to the last king of Arzawa that was defeated by the Hittites, and he keeps on going. There was a vote of prayer Pudohepta, consort of Hattusila III, and chief priestess. And they actually mention this legendary character in this prayer. This is dated to the mid 13th century BCE. In fact, Pudohepta had traveled to the sea to make an offering in return for the sea god's intervention in apprehending Payama Radu. So one other god is appealed to, but the reference to the god's name is fragmentary. So he is really a problem. He's causing much mischief, especially towards including Troy, right? Now, Manapa Tarhuta attempted to drive out Payama Radu, but failed. In response, the Hittite king sent his own forces to deal with Payama Radu, camping along the Siha River by Wilusa. Oh, once again, it appears that that this Payama Radu has interest in Troy. Again, it's strategic. It's you hold Troy, you have the key to the passageway between the Black Sea and the Aegean into the Mediterranean, right? So there you have. So, so of course you have this connection here, right? Oh, also the Hittite records do mention something else. They mention a series of, well, a tunnel, a great water tunnel that's located at Wilusa. Let's go to the next image. They found it. I guess the Hittite records are confirmed. So this is a great water temple. It was discovered by Korfman. It goes all the way back to 2600 BCE. So yeah, it exists. Next image. There you go. You take a look in there. Lots of excavations. So once again, we can confirm this is indeed, as you can see, a pretty great water tunnel, right? Yes, and it does fit. But again, we're using Hittite records to realize, hey, this will fit in with archaeology. Okay, let's look at me for a little bit. The Hittite king's attempt to suppress the local Luvian troublemaker, Payuma Radu, failed. In fact, Payama Radu was able to assert himself in the region by entering into an alliance with guess who? That's right, the great king of Ahhiyawa. Yes, that's right, the Mycenaeans. Right. It mentions not just the Mycenaeans, but the great king, according to Hittite records. To seal this deal, Payama Radu gave his daughter's hand in marriage to Atpa, the vassal ruler of Milawanda, or Miletus, which is where the Mycenaeans have a foothold, further securing his power base in the region of Western Anatolia. For as we know, the region of Miletus was under Mycenaean control. Are you seeing things? So the story of the conflict between the Mycenaeans, Greeks, and the Trojans is a little bit more complicated, and probably too complicated for a story like the Iliad. This is 10 years, and we're going. We're going on. This is a longer period of time. We're going 50, 60. The years are adding up of conflicts. As mentioned around the late 1300s, the Hittite king, Suppiluliuma II, 1344 to 1322, cultivated a close relationship with Kukuuni, the king of Troy. Now it's going to get really exciting. Just a minute here. I want some water here. I'm drinking water because I'm getting into something pretty cool. All right. Here it is. This is going to throw everybody off. It's a big moment. Drum roll, please. As mentioned around the late 1300s, Hittite king Suppiluliuma II, 1344 to 1322 BCE, cultivated a close friendship with Kukuuni, the king of Troy. In 1280, the grandson of Suppiluliuma II, a king Muwatalli II, he reigned from 1295 to 1272. I want you to lock that in your memory. 1295 to 1272. He desired to maintain that friendly precedent with the current king of Troy. Now, before I go further, I want to mention, remember, supposedly, theoretically, in 1190, Troy was under Trojan power, right? They're under non-Greeks. So 1190. Now we're going back between 1295 to 1272. And we have a Hittite king, Muwatalli II, desired to maintain that friendly precedent with the current king of Troy. His name is Alexandus. Alexandus? Wait, that's not a Hittite name. That's a Greek name. Yes, it is a Greek name. So he created a peace treaty. In fact, Muwatalli II recalled that friendship between the Hittites and those of Wilusa or Troy went back 3 centuries, going back to King Hatti I, he was king between 1586 to 1556. So, of course, we know that's not quite true because you look at the records, it looks like that Troy flip-flopped a few times. We're with the Asua League, said earlier Hittite king. You're with them. And then you're with the Arzawa, and then you change. Yeah, so, but anyway, it's poetic license. We have a friendship goes way back when. So, we're not done yet. While having such a prominent legacy, Muwatalli, the Hittite king, focuses upon the fact in the inscription that lineage is not as important as ability, suggesting that Alexandus may not have gained his position via royal succession, but it came from elsewhere, and so was not related to the previous king Kukulini by blood, which is pretty obvious. That's a Hittite name. Most Hittite scholars are in agreement that Alexandus is obviously not a Hittite name. In fact, most agree that the name Alexandus is Alexander. It's Alexander. Alex, a Greek. He's king of Troy. He's king of Troy all the way back between 1295 to 1272. He's there. Is he Mycenaean Greek? Wouldn't he be? How many other Greeks are there? You're going, oh no. Yeah, that's right. Your mind should be going, boom. That somehow they got it. Then they lose it again because they don't have it later on. However, let's have some fun with this. Alexander, of course, was the king of Troy, according to Homer, an earlier king, but his nickname was Paris. The later Paris, who was the son of King Priam of Troy, then must have been named after him. And all of a sudden, we just dived into, oh my goodness, the Iliad is becoming history. The Iliad is becoming history, but not the way we thought. It's like you're having this moment like going, okay, so what else is going on? Well, guess what? Let's ready for the hits are keeping coming, as well as the Hittites. For King Alexandus, what he happens for the king. So for this king, old Alexandus, according to this treaty, the gods invoked to secure the treaty was Apollonius, known as the storm god of the army. Apollonius? Apollo. And according to the Iliad, Apollo is indeed declared as the greatest divine warrior of the Trojans. We have to remember it is Apollo who helped Paris kill Achilles. Whoa. We're there again. It's like Apollo. We talked about this before, and obviously this information is coming from the Hittites. It's not even coming from the Mycenaeans, and it's corresponding. All right. A goddess is also invoked in the treaty, a certain Kashukur, a deity of local springs, which makes sense because of the water tunnel connected with Troy. This evidence means that sometime during this period of time, the kings went for having Luvian names to having Greek names, definitely indicating that the Mycenaeans at this point had established possibly their own king on the throne of Troy. So maybe the Iliad is referring to the idea of regaining Troy as opposed to, you know, possibly. Who knows, right? Mm. Okay. Although, so we do have some interesting information here. Although Troy was within close to our Zawa lands, um, you still have this idea that maybe his Alexander's throne may have been a little bit wobbly and maybe not secure because he's an outsider. And this adds an interesting bit. Did the Greeks, the Mycenaeans, take over from the Luvians? And now the Hittites are trying to form a treaty with them, realizing that maybe they stood to gain with a connection with the Mycenaeans over the Luvians, possibly. I don't know. We don't know, but we know that's a little wobbly. The Hittites are trying to keep this Mycenaean king in power. But then, around 1285, it appears that there's a change. King, the king himself, old King Alexander, old Alexandus, he does lose a throne. It was wobbly. Well, do we know the name of the next king? We do know the name of the next king. The next king is named Walmu, King Walmu of Troy. And so there you have it. So um, now what happens now? His position was also insecure. So this is definitely not a Greek name, possibly because the Mycenaeans or Ahhiyawa were active in the region. In fact, he is reported that Walmu actually flees, and he fled to the great king of Myra after being ousted from his home city. So yeah, it looks like that he's been ousted by who? Probably the Mycenaeans or the Luvians, but probably it looks like Walmu. He could be Hittite, he could be Luvian. I don't know. We don't know, but it looks like during this period of time of the 1290s, the 1280s, you're having these major shifts going on, which is 100 years, before the final supposed conflict. So we can safely say that this conflict, we can't, we could safely say this conflict between the Mycenaeans and the Hittites, while and of course the Trojans, while it started as early as the 1340s and 30s, that by the time we get to the 1290s and 1280s, it's ongoing. And then you have this marauder in between. So I would say, here we go, drum roll, please. The war is not 10 years, it's 100 years. Got it? You just drop off a zero for dramatic effect. It's a long, ongoing, very strong conflict during this period of time. Are you guys learning things? Is this fun? Before we go any further, you're going, oh no, you said the hits are keeping coming. Well, the next one is an actual hit. What? A earthquake. Accordingly, what we happen here is that there is an earthquake. As mentioned, the Iliad refers to the fact that there was an earthquake that destroyed the city of Troy, and that it was then rebuilt by the help of Apollo and Achilles. Archaeologists have identified this as Troy 7. Around 1250, the archaeological evidence proves beyond a reasonable doubt that a massive earthquake, which effectively ends this period known as Troy 6, destroyed the city. According to the Greeks, Troy was rebuilt, as I said, by Apollo as well as Poseidon. And so we see again a correlation, another correlation. Is there an earthquake? There's an earthquake. Is Troy rebuilt? Troy is rebuilt. They got another fact straight, right? Now, according to the Tawagalawa Letter written by Hattusilus III to the Mycenaean King Ahhiyawa around 1250, Payama Radu is still alive and well and continues to cause troubles for the Hittites in Western Anatolia. The guy is still going on during this period of time of earthquake. Hattusilus III orders his extraction, saying that Payu Radu is to be his vassal and assures the king of Ahhiyawa that he would receive safe conduct. The letter refers to the name of the brother of the king of Ahhiyawa, named Tawagalawa. Tawagalawa, really, Tawagalawa, which again is not an Anatolian name. It is a form of the name Itakalis. And so, once again, we got Greeks there, got Greeks. Some Hittite scholars say that person indeed was intended to be the vassal, was not the rebellious Payaradu, because it depends on how you read the text, but the brother of the king Tawagalo. You see, Payama Radu continues to cause problems and is mentioned even in the Mewawata letter, the Miletus letter of 1240 BCE. This guy just does not die. I think there should be like some kind of big movie dedicated to him, right? Hattusilus III mentions the fact that the Hittites and the Ahhiyawas, Mycenaeans, once fought over Troy. Wait, you got more? I got more. Once again, I go in slow motion. Hattusilus III mentions the fact that the Hittites and the Ahiawans, or the Mycenaeans, once fought over Troy, but were now at peace over the matter. He says, now as we have come to an agreement on Wilusa, over which we went to war. Of course, this indicates the Mycenaean Greeks and the Hittites fought a war over Troy earlier, and perhaps the Greeks did win the war after all, maybe perhaps not, but as you can see, it makes everything a little more interesting. Okay, so we do have more. And we do have, of course, the idea of the pretender to the throne. We talked about the other ones too, but okay, let's look at a few images. So there is the city of Troy. As we this looks more like Troy 6 rather than 7, but I think the harbors will be consistent. Keep on going. Sapuluni is a seal. Next image. Good. This, by the way, that whole story connected to Troy and Alexandros is on this actual piece. You're looking at it right here. I kind of wish we don't have all of it, but we have enough to figure things out. Next image. Of course, we mentioned the fact that Apollo. It's interesting because we have very little information of Apollo during the Mycenaean or Archaic Age. Well, I mean, Apollo up until the Archaic Age, but it turns out that Apollo has leanings toward an Anatolian background, as we learn even from the treaty. Next image. Here we move on to the Sea Peoples. During the same period of time, you have a conflict, because what's going on here, we have a greater conflict that has to be understood, and as a wrap-up. This is something called World War Zero. Luckily began with a well-timed attack by the Luvians on the Hittites, which collapsed the Hittite Empire. The Luvians likely then began a series of invasions by sea upon the Egyptians, the stabilizing of their civilization. The Odyssey, the aftermath of the Trojan War, brought instability of its own to Greece, ultimately leading to their decline as well. Now, while the Sea People appeared to be one of the main causes for the fall of the Bronze Age, about the Mediterranean. Other factors contributed to making the other civilizations more susceptible to such a collapse. This collapse is at its most devastating between 1225 to 1175. So the period of time that's connected to the Trojan War. Look at me for a little bit. Connected to the time of the Trojan War, around 1290, is a period of anarchy. It's a period where we're starting to lose a lot in the way of records. And so, I mean, we need to get the greater context of what's going on. Sure, we see these various leagues and alliances and everything else going on, but there's more that is happening as well. And let's take a look at this. There was an unusual amount of droughts and famines at this time. There were earthquakes, there were internal rebellions. It was a very tough time to be around. In fact, around 1210 BC, a severe famine impacted the entire Mediterranean, causing a major disruption in daily life and forcing many to find other ways to survive. But this was amongst a series of previous droughts and disturbances and plagues even before this. There's another situation that happens, and that is a series of devastating earthquakes. So we're seeing, so not only Troy is destroyed around 1250 to be rebuilt, but a lot of the cities are being destroyed by these tectonic disturbances. Another thing was a shift. As you know, this is the end of the Bronze Age. It's a very turbulent period, the 1200s into the 1100s. But what takes place of bronze is iron. But the iron comes about from the area of Eastern Europe and gets in the hands of the Luvians. Now, iron is lighter, it's cheaper, it's faster to make. And so as a result, it's more efficient on many different ways. And so what happens is that the Luvians, this technology is coming from Eastern Europe, it's arriving, and the Luvians gain it, which means that gives them the advantage against the Hittites, as well as a group known as the Sea Peoples. And remember, the Sea Peoples are the Luvians, and the Luvians are the Sea Peoples. We know that because what happens is that the Hittites used to had mercenaries who were Luvians, and we know the name of those mercenaries, the group. And we also know that the Egyptians had their mercenaries that were also Luvians, known as Luca. And so the Hittites and the Egyptians often fought each other, and they came to a head. They kept locking horns, especially around what is now known as the Battle of known as Armageddon, or the Megiddo Valley, the Jezreel Valley, which is right south of the Sea of Galilee. And so the border between the Hittites and the Egyptians was right there. It went back and forth, and it seemed to lock there for literally hundreds of years, until we got a great battle of Kadesh, and both sides think they won. And you had the first peace treaty in world history. Now, what happens is, remember, these mercenaries, these Luvians, were fighting each other. So you'd have the Hittites on one side with their chariots and their men, with these Luvian mercenaries, and on the other side you have the Egyptians, on their chariots with their Luvian mercenaries on the other side. We know this from primary sources, from original records. And what they will do is they'll fight a battle. And when the mercenaries get killed off on one side or the other, what will happen is simply the chariot from one side or the other just runs off, because they don't want to kill their own sons, but they'll kill the mercenaries. There's a little bit of resentment towards this, right? They're being used as fodder, right? So what happens, though, with this peace treaty, the first peace treaty, you have now all of these mercenaries who no longer are employed. Now, when you think to yourself, for about 100 years, you've been doing looting and killing, marauding, pirating, and but working for somebody. Idle hands are tools of Santa. Sorry, this is a Hittite podcast. Yeah. What happens is they have nothing better to do but turn on their former employers. These people are connected to the sea people. We know because they name those particular two, Luca and I forget the other name. They mention this on Egyptian records as sea people. They mention them as, and the sea people include the Luvians, the Luca, and this and this and that. And they actually gave a list, and over half the list of those groups that are mentioned as the sea people, as the people who helped bring down the Bronze Age era, happen to be Luvians. The Luvians that are connected to, yes, the people of Western Anatolia, yes, the Trojans are connected to that too, right? They are Luvians. This is making sense. So you have this. Another thing that happens is that the Luvians were very much involved in the various copper deposits in Cyprus. They were, and that's south of their territories. They had this regular revenue going on, and the Hittites got greedy. They cut across Luvian territory and they grabbed Cyprus for themselves, and they dominated it, which also weakened the Luvians because that was their major resource for trade. It was one of them, and so you have that too. So the Hittites, yeah, they messed themselves up. So the Luvians are these sea people. I hope that makes sense. I just want you to get a bigger picture, So what happens now is these Luvians, these sea people are guess what they have? They got iron. And so they're going to iron things out pretty quickly as they're going to go marauding about with all about the Mediterranean, causing disturbances everywhere. And this, of course, is during the period as we're going into the 1200s and the beginning of the 1100s, which is precisely the time of the supposed Iliad war. That's 10 years. It's covering the same period of time. So there is a connection. That's why I have to bring it up. Okay, so let's go to the next image. Pull the image there. So there it is. So you got the Luvians, and you can see the Luvians, Alisa, that is Cyprus, and those are the Hittites, and you see everything is going to be collapsing in on them. Okay, so what will happen, you can see from this chart, however, that as the Luvians are moving, going east as well as south, because eventually they'll go to Egypt, which is further down, you can see that the Ahhiyawa will be moving towards them. So lot will say because they are distrustful of the Luvians because they have great resources there, even in Western Anatolia, and they don't want them to have that much power. Let's go to the next image, and you can see kind of a closer up. Oh, okay. I guess we have it reversed there. Oh, yeah, no, that's right. You can see a little closer up, and you can see there's the Luca right there. And look there. Do you see the Wilusa right there? Right? They're part of this group. They are Luvians. Next image. Okay, and then of course this is Troy. That's my photo. Let's take that down. But we're heading towards the end of the talk here. Okay, so what happens now is in 1208 BCE, the Sea Peoples combined their forces with the Libyans to the west and met the Egyptian navy with their combined forces at Pereire, at the edge of the Nile Delta, which is recorded on the Merenatef Stele. So we do have something going on right here. The Merenatef Stele, by the way, also refers to the devastation of the Levant areas. So as it turns out, the Sea Peoples, who are Luvians, are attacking the Levant, the area what is Israel and Palestine. Around 1200 BC, the Mycenaeans began to fall to the Sea People all about the Aegean, or at least so we think. Soon the attacks on the Sea People arrived against the Mycenaeans. However, the palace at Pylos was destroyed by an invasion from the sea approximately around 1200 BCE, with many of the Linear B tablets found here describing the preparations for attack. So we have a description of the attack of the sea people of the Luvians during this time. So those who are related to the Trojans will attack the Mycenaeans, the Greeks. Isn't this interesting? Again, we're really complicating the picture, right? The first attack involved, we actually have a record of the attack against of the Luvians against the Mycenaeans. The first attack involved attacks on the priests, but no burning. The scribes had a chance to write about it before the second attack that destroyed the palace. The tablet reads, "The enemy grabbed all the priests from everywhere and without reason murdered them secretly by simply drowning them. I am calling out to my descendants for the sake of history," which I like the idea of awareness of history there. "I am told that the northern strangers continued their terrible attack, terrorizing and plundering until a short time ago." And of course, we have another record of the various ships being sent out, and it looks like they're sending people out as to the gods, be dedicated to the gods. Again, this could be human sacrifice or just dedication. We don't know for sure. It doesn't say what happens to them. According to Greek legends, the Mycenaeans of the Trojan War fame were replaced by Dorian invaders from the north, who were only half civilized and speaking a different Greek dialect of their own. By 1200, there were no more luxurious weapons and vases made by the Mycenaeans, and the archaeological evidence after 1200 reveals that there is a massive reduction in settlement sites, so the Mycenaeans do fall. Still, the archaeological evidence demonstrates that while the Mycenaeans were destroyed by the sea people, many of the sea people were actually Mycenaeans. So it just kind of mixes things up. So we see that some of them are, oh, I guess we're going to join them. Can't beat them, join them kind of attitude, which would make sense for Mycenaeans because after all, many of them are just pirates anyway. So it's like, yeah, well, we lost everything. I guess we'll join them. And what about the Luvians? Okay, according to Zenger, the Luvian involvement runs in 3 stages during the 13th century. First, the so-called Sea People invasion took place, during which the navy of allied Luvian petty states from the Aegean region advanced together to the southeast. Second, the Luvians, who had emanated from the eastern shore of the Aegean Sea, were then attacked a few years later by the Greek, who are all allied together. And this is part of the so-called Trojan War, which is made more focused than the reality. And finally, third, there was a civil war without external influences, and it broke out amongst the Greeks. And the Odyssey seems to demonstrate that the civil war was already occurring. Okay, so we have that. So there you have it. So let's begin. I'll just say a brief thing for the first step. I will say the so-called Sea People invasion took place, during which the Navy took parts of the Aegean region, advanced to the southeast. Soon after, approximately around 1200 BCE, the Sea People, inclusive of the Luvians, began to invade Arzawa in Western Anatolia, and they conquered it. And then they began to attack the Hittite Empire itself. Because the Luvians were largely a segment of the population of the Hittite Empire, this was at once an external war and a civil war. So there seems to be even a civil war there amongst the Luvians because they mentioned Arzawa. But one of the triggers for the Luvian to rethink their vassalage of the Hittites again was the Hittite invasion of the conquest of Cyprus under King Tawagalawa IV, who reigned from 1237 to 1209. Once again, we're getting so close to the period of 1190, and you can see it here. So what will happen is when Suppiluliuma II, 1207 to 1178, came to the throne, the Hittite and much of the Eastern Mediterranean was in chaos. Soon, Suppiluliuma II was attacking the former vassal state of Tarhuntus. Of course, he claimed victory, but eventually, in fact, he boasts how he defeated them and everything else. But what happens in reality is that around 1178 BCE, Suppiluliuma II, king of the Hittites, was defeated, with some saying he was killed in battle, while other sources say he simply vanished. And so from there on, the Hittites Even though there was a king after that, pretty well retreated, the power was broken. In fact, the power was broken everywhere. The sea people continued down to Syria. They continued down to Canaan. They headed down to Ugarit in northern Syria around 1180. And when Amarturip was king of the city. We have records there of what happened there. In fact, the king of Ugarit warned Shuwara, the grand supervisor of the king of Cyprus, Alicia, that a fleet of 20 ships was seen at sea. This would be the force of Luvians sent off to retake the island from the Hittites, now further strengthened because of their Sea People coalition. Shuwara immediately wrote back asking the king of Ugarit where exactly was his fleet to help them. But what happens, of course, is and he responded to the king of Cyprus as follows. He says, "My father, behold, the enemy's ships came here. My cities were burned, and they did evil things in my country. Does not my father know that all my troops and chariots are in the land of Hatti, and all my ships are in the land of Luca? Thus the country is abandoned to itself." I'm quoting here. "May my father know it. The 7 ships of the enemy that came here inflicted much damage upon us." Now, what happens here, this is very important, I think probably too important right now. Soon the sea peoples, who, especially those known as the Palashet, entered into southern Canaan. These Luvian sea people entered in to southern Canaan, known as the Palashet, and they seized what is known as the Gaza Strip. And they eventually become known as the Philistines. And the word Pelashet, a derivative of that word, will be the word Palestine. Dramatic moment, but I think you're already making a connection here. You're saying, wow, this got a little bit more important than we thought. Yeah, I know, relevance, right? In the Egyptian, of course, then they continued on, of course, to attack the Egyptians. The second phase, the Luvians, who had emanated from the eastern shore of the Aegean Sea, were then attacked a few years later by the allied Greek forces. This is the Trojan War, but as we know, it's a lot longer than we thought. And what we saw were glimpses that while the Trojan War seems to focus at the end, this conflict was already constantly going on long before. Troy back and forth, and so forth. Okay. And then, of course, finally, third, a civil war. We see this, of course, after Troy was supposedly, captured by the Mycenaeans, perhaps in 1190. Soon after, because we know in 1200, historically, Pylos was over. Well, this is 10 years later. Once again, probably not exact 1190, but you can see, hey, 10 years, not so bad. But it looks like soon after, the Mycenaean civilizations fell. And so you have that now. And you're thinking, okay, well, that's pretty interesting. And you can see me flipping through pages because I want to get to another big moment. Because you're going, that's great, Dr. Rietveld. I learned a lot. I learned all about that. Wow, there's a lot of evidence there. So are these ideas, how relevant are these ideas? Because, you always have the so what. I want to give you a little bit of so what. Can I give you some so whats? And you'll see these ideas pertain to a lot. You see, later on, you have somebody by the name of Hesiod. He wrote a theogony written around 700, and he talks about how humanity had a miserable lot according to 2 misfortunes. First, the evil was released because of Pandora opening the forbidden box given to her by Zeus. And second, the gradual deterioration of humanity over the years since the first golden age of humanity. Now, Hesiod dates are determined by his reference to a certain Amphidamas, who, as it turns out, was the hero of a war between Chalcis and Eretria, which this war happened around 705 BCE. So most scholars agree that Hesiod thrived around the turn of the 8th century to the 7th century. From the point of view of Hesiod, there existed 4 distinct ages of humanity: gold, silver, bronze, iron. For Hesiod, each age became progressively worse, like in Daniel's Nebuchadnezzar's dream, right? The first period was the golden age of mortals. Those who had lived during this age were both happy and they're beloved by the gods. When they died, their souls became inspired daemons. These daemons were transformed into the agents of Zeus, who invisibly watched over human affairs and, for the most part, were friendly spirits dedicated to helping humanity along their spiritual and ethical journey. Apparently, they're not doing very well right now. We must recollect that the word daemon developed from the same root as divinity, so we're not becoming demons. It is during the next stage, known as the Silver Age, where the problems begin. Don't worry, you'll see the connection to this talk in a little bit. You got to be patient. Where the problems began. According to Hesiod, while the first stage we were just before the gods, Greek word is dike, we were just before the gods, justice. During the next age, known as the Silver Age, this is where the problems begin. According to Hesiod, people became selfish and violence arose amongst them. As opposed to viewing the gods in full control over destiny, over life, people began to look into the rippling and distorted reflections in the pool and began to believe, hey, they were responsible for their deeds. And so pride comes about, hubris. They're the ones. And what's the old saying? Pride cometh before the fall. Hence, becoming foolish and the committing hubris. What happens now, because they're not refusing to give the gods their due, now we enter into what is called the Bronze Age. Hey, is that the age, right? Okay. During the Bronze Age, humanity became delusional, ete. The gods seemingly leaving them to their own devices. They become crazy. They fall into uttermost state of violence. This age was compared to the spear, an age that was both terrible and strong, where people needed to wear armor during this period of time known as the Bronze Age. So they become deluded. Now, finally, there arrived the Iron Age, the age where they now lived. Of course, the Iron Age is worse. It's a worse age where humanity is lost within the shadow of themselves, in the murkiness of their ego, and become completely self-destructive in their pursuit of indulgence, of selfishness, of violence, right? All social boundaries are lost now. For Hesiod, humanity is gradually losing all its ethical standards, becoming completely vile, becoming wicked. The last divinities to abandon the evil world are Dike, translated as justice. But Hesiod pondered a solution for this state of spiritual, ethical chaos. He believed that during the Iron Age, but at the end of the Bronze Age, there existed models for inspiration, for hope, for the salvation of this evil age. For Hesiod, these were the heroes. Hesiod believed the heroes did not follow the wicked ways of the world, and so were not degenerate at all, exemplifying the kinds of moral qualities that could possibly return everyone to the golden age if they were to become the model for others to follow. The heroes were noble and righteous, acknowledged the gods rather than themselves. Hesiod declared they were a divine race of hero men that were called demigods, a generation before our own. Now you're going, what is this age? This age is the age of the Trojan War. This age is the age of the Iliad, of the Odyssey. If we follow the Iliad and the Odyssey, it displayed for us how to get to a better ethical state. Hesiod, what he did is he moralized the Iliad and the Odyssey, to become a model for Greeks and then later Romans on how to live. You're going, but these are horrible people, right? Look at Achilles. Yeah, look at Achilles, because each one of them also goes through that process. Look at Hercules. Yes, they go through the process. Look at this. Just like the ages, each person is a microcosm of it. They're just before the gods. Was Achilles just before the gods? He was. Then he become what? He became hubris. I refused to fight, right? Agamemnon took Briseis away from me, right? What happens from there? He becomes deluded. I'm not going to help, unless they burn down the ships. I mean, that's delusion. That's crazy. And then what happens is the last age of iron is justice. It's justice, where they're judged for their deeds and they have a chance to redeem themselves. See how that works? Chance to redeem. And if they do redeem, then if we follow this model, we move back to a new golden age. See how that works? If we pass the test. So the Iliad and the Odyssey, that's the test. They all blow it. They all go through. Yes, righteous before the gods. You see them all do hubris. Take a look at this, Oedipus, I will never kill dad. I'll never marry mom. Never. Guess what happens? See this? Or actually, you don't see this? You didn't. The point is, you're seeing this happen. They have to go through that cycle themselves, because that's the only way they can learn their lesson. The only way out is through. And that's what you learn through Agamemnon. Does he go through that? Yeah, he does, doesn't he? He sure does go through that cycle of righteous before the gods decay. Then, of course, pride, hubris, ate, delusion. And then, of course, he goes through the idea of judgment, right? Being judged for what they do. And so you have this process going through, which is, of course, nemesis is the idea of judgment, right? Nemesis. And so what happens now is these concepts become there. And so what will occur as a result of that is that everybody's looking for the golden age. And so the Greeks and the Romans will look at the Iliad and the Odyssey as guides to that righteous period of time where gods and humans interacted with each other, where there were heroes. We could become heroes again. And so what happens? Alexander the Great, what does he do? Yeah, what he does is the first thing I'm going to do to conquer the world is I'm the new Achilles. I am reincarnated Achilles, right? And he has a special copy of the Iliad that was given to him by Aristotle. It's notated. And the notations, of course, are connected to, in many ways, to Hesiod's ideas and claims. He believes he's going to bring the golden age. And so the first thing he does, he conquers Troy. And he arrives at Troy. He runs around the site with his lover, who he says is my Patroclus. Why not, right? And you have the renewal of that idea. And then, because he believes he's bringing in the golden age, right? And after all, heroes are always half God. Remember, he went down to the oracle, down in Siwa, between Egypt and Libya, and there he was at the famous oracle, and there to see Zeus Ammon, and he said what? No, that's right. Philip is not your father. I'm your father. He's like, I'm half God. I'm a hero. He sees himself as a new Achilles, so he minted coins showing us how as a new Achilles. Then this guy by the name of Julius Caesar, and then Augustus has that same idea. We're going to return to the golden age. How we're going to do that? We're going to segment through Aeneas, right? Put together the Aeneid as written by Virgil, and which is part 3 of the Iliad, the Odyssey, and the Roman ones, the Aeneid, and we're going to continue this idea. And so this idea is that Augustus is going to bring the new golden age. Who says so? Virgil. And everybody's going, this is the fulfillment of the age. And then, of course, you have this idea, then, of course, it arrives into Christianity, and Christianity will say, well, Jesus is going to bring in the golden age. And so the early church adopted these same ideas, these same protocols, the same beliefs. They said, well, it's justified because, hey, Nebuchadnezzar has these ideas, right, in Book of Daniel, so it must coalesce and be connected together. And so, therefore, and so people are looking at, though, except for Christianity, look at the Bible, but you're looking at these prototypes. However, it's interesting because you're going to see that even early Christian connections make connections to the Iliad. And so if you listen to my talk earlier, you'll realize on the catacombs of Rome, you'll see that some of the catacombs make direct connection to mythological figures and the Iliad to Christian heroes, and they make the direct connection there. And so they're trying to take on and continue that tradition. So these ideas are quite strong indeed. So that's the so what. That's the so what that, hey, that, that pride cometh before the fall. You always say that, right? Well, guess what? I think today it's like a spectator sport. What do you mean? You see, you have somebody, if somebody gains so much power, they gain so much in a way. And then what happens is that like a celebrity or a politician, I think it's a study in humanity. It's a study of humanity in the sense that if a person has so much, they're righteous, and then all of a sudden they have so much pride in themselves, they start defying hubris, pride, and then we just watch. And you see that little meme or whatever with a deer eating popcorn or something, we watch it happen like a spectator sport. We watch a delusion because we know that they're going to go from the area of pride into delusion, into madness. And then, of course, following that, we wait. And many of you probably have a movie star in mind, or television star, or a politician, or whatever it may be. And we watch, and then we go, okay, now it's judgment time. Are they going to survive the judgment time? And so from the Greek and Roman perspective is that it's not that humanity is imperfect. We are messed up. Well, the real strength is, can we get through it and become better people as a result? Get it? You understand it? You're going, these people are all messed up. Yeah. And the Greeks and Romans know they're messed up. But did they get out? Did they get better? Are they better people in the end? And then, of course, the whole lesson is we see the story. We see what happens in the end. Achilles, what happens to him in the end? Well, not very good. For a while, but they pay the price. In many other cases, though, there is forgiveness. And so the question is that maybe it's good to have role models to look up to. It's good to have heroes. Realize that our heroes will fall. But also, if they're able to pick themselves up afterwards, then they are heroes, truly, after all. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.